Welcome to episode 99 of the Coast Coast AFL podcast with Nick and Blaze. I am Blaze, your host, and I cannot believe that we're so close to 100 quote unquote full episodes of the podcast. It is crazy. I know we've done a bunch of half episodes. The preseason analysis series obviously covered a lot of that. So technically we're at like 109, 110, something like that. We're actually a bit higher than 100, but we're very close to 100 full episodes of the podcast. The episode 100 falling on Easter weekend next week, which is kind of really interesting timing because there's going to be a lot more games to cover. There's going to be 8 games instead of because I think only 2 teams have to bye. So that'll be really interesting.
Yeah,
But before I ramble on any longer in this intro, how are you doing, Mr. Cyrek?
not too bad, not too bad. All things considering football-wise. But on the 100, it's almost fate because, as I said, we did have that delay, which means it would have been this week if we were able to get a Brisbane podcast out. But it means the 100th episode will be marked off by Port Adelaide versus Richmond. And with the
Oh
form of
my
the two
god, I
teams,
didn't even
it
realize
might be a
that.
contest. I know. Are you able to go to that game or are you busy?
Is that is
Busy time.
That's here in Melbourne, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Uh,
it's Saturday afternoon, so you might be working.
no, I won't be working. I could be sleeping. Um,
Yeah,
Let me actually quickly
that's
take a
fair.
look because I have not had a look yet. Um,
Yeah, it's 1:15 West
1:15?
Australian time, so
That's
that'll
4:15.
be 3:15?
4:15.
Oh, 4:15.
It
I
hasn't
don't see how the savings
clocks haven't
transfer.
ticked over yet. I think it's a week after,
Uh,
or it's like close
week
to
after,
May.
okay.
Um,
Yeah. Anyway.
yeah, okay. I
Uh
might actually be at
but
that
apart from
game.
that, yeah. Either way, it's been a good weekend. Yeah, not too busy, not too busy. Just surviving. Well, not surviving, but as I said, we waited to see what Hurricane Narelle would do. Unfortunately, did hit the coast of Exmouth pretty hard, but didn't do too much to the rest of WA. It was just a pretty standard wet weekend. Pretty sure we had more than average rainfall in March, and it's like been pretty much 30s up until this week. So it's been a very weird one
That is,
for the weather
it's
statistics.
literally just Brisbane's tropical weather, except on the west coast, or
Yeah, but
Queensland's
it's
tropical weather.
Brisbane's tropical weather without the humidity. It's
Yeah,
just been like the rain and the heat have been both separate events. So, yeah, as I said, honestly, as I said, I'm just thankful that it was at least limited to a bit area, and we hope anyone in Exmouth or that was sort of affected didn't have too much damage done.
yes.
Um, but yeah, it yeah, that's apart from that, done pretty good except for football itself, which at times was pretty shocking this week, as the title infers.
Yes, we will get onto all of that in a moment. For me, my week has been not too bad. I am on my weekend. I am sick of looking at hot cross buns every morning, and unfortunately, I've got at least a week to go. So that's gonna be just pushing through all of that this week. Is gonna be a nightmare. I'm not looking forward to it, but I got to do it. The joys of working in a bakery. Um, Otherwise, I do have something really exciting coming up. I can't share it as of yet. I'm waiting to actually hear from my parents as of recording this in regards to it, so I can let you all know of that a bit later. But otherwise,
Ooh.
if you happen to be at the Melbourne Food and Wine Festival at all this weekend, you might have actually tasted some of the hot cross buns I made. So I obviously I'm not going to leak who I work for, but there you go. Just a
Yeah,
little bit of
yeah,
information there. Um, but let's jump into probably the biggest piece of news that has come out in the past couple of days. In fact, actually, it was like this morning, technically, as of recording this.
mm,
But Kylie Minogue is set to headline the AFL Grand Final this year.
yeah, and it just makes sense. I don't think she's ever headlined a grand final or anything like that.
I think
I
she's
think
done
my
some stuff NRL related, but I don't know if it was ever a grand final.
yeah. I think in her popularity, she was spending a bit more time in the UK rather than over
Oh yeah,
here.
she was very much
Um,
overseas a lot.
yeah, so yeah, it's good to have her back. And yeah, I mean, it should be absolutely fantastic. I think one of the things about the grand final is that, I think they always complain, oh, it needs to support Australian artists and, but the fact is, like, a lot of the up and coming bands are very much like the more lower key indie rock or like electronics, and they just don't really take to stadium acoustics that well. I think I say this every year. But Carly Minogue, someone who's worked with big arenas before, everyone knows the songs. It will be good for like the older and youngest audiences. So, yeah, it just makes sense. I'm a big fan of Kylie. My mum always used to have like a lot of her CDs, so I listened to all the singles started, and then I like went back into her career. Big fan of like the early to probably mid 2000s works.
Oh, yeah.
I've got a couple of her albums on vinyl. Fever is probably like one of my favorite Australian pop records of old time. So yeah, as I said, I'm very much looking forward to it. I am a big Kylie stan.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really big get for the AFL. Not saying that like, getting international artists is a bad thing. I think we've had some fantastic
Yeah.
international bands and artists over at least the past 10 years. I only say 10 years because the Killers come under that banner, and I was very happy with them. But no, I think it's really good to actually have someone, one, who's Australian, and two, who's from Melbourne, like, to cover Melbourne's
Yeah.
big grand final. Because
Mm.
normally it's like the big one that gets the Australian artists is the NRL grand final, and normally half the time it's Jimmy Barnes. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, this is definitely a really big thing and a really good thing, for the AFL itself, and hopefully it means they can get other bands and artists, like Australian bands and artists to like headline it a little bit more often in the next couple of years. Like I know, Fox Footy did that collaboration with Parkway Drive for like their new like quote unquote intro theme music, to all their
Oh
shows and
yeah.
stuff last year before. So, and whilst Parkway Drive wouldn't be like as big of a band to for like
No,
entertainment at the
I
MCG,
don't think they could.
like,
Yeah.
getting more homegrown musicians to involved in stuff like this. Like I've already forgotten who did last year's grand final, but like they brought in
Oh,
like Baker Boy
yeah.
and Jessica Malboy, or is
Yeah,
it?
I think that was like the pre-match because they had the big
Oh, it's
international
Snoop Dogg.
touring ones.
It was Snoop Dogg.
Snoop Dogg, that's
Yeah,
right.
he brought in
Yeah.
a bunch of Australian like musicians as a part of his act, which was such a cool thing.
Yeah,
So
like
like,
that was pretty cool. Yeah, as I said, like I have gripes about Snoop Dogg for various reasons, but like he does know how to put on a show.
he
Like there's
does.
no denying that. He is a good entertainer.
But yeah. Any other final thoughts before we jump over to the actual footy?
Nah, as I said, the only maybe hard thing is like choosing like what parts of her discography to cover because as I said, I'm pretty sure she's got a pretty wide catalog to go from, but it would just be like most of the major hits.
Yeah, I would assume it'd be mostly the major hits. Probably any new
Yeah.
music she has lined up as well.
Oh, as I said, like I think she'll probably put Padam Padam on just because it was like her biggest recent single, so stuff like that. But
Yeah,
yeah, nah, I said they know they know how to do it.
they do.
They know just to play the hits and just as long as to get all sorts of the crowd involved, which Carly will be able to do. Um, More grand final news. We go to the specific time of the AFL.
Yes, we do. It is locked in for the next 2 years, so this year and next year, as an afternoon grand final, which means the chatter and bickering about whether it's going to be a Twilight grand final or not will not be happening for at least the next 12 months, 18 months. So I don't know. It's not like huge news, but I know the AFL really does want to do a Twilight grand final again. Um,
Yeah. Or the AFL media.
yes.
Yeah, it's always up in the air whether like AFL wants it. I'm not sure. Like I know Gillen, I think, really wanted to do it, but yeah, as I said, this one the article states that there's no compelling reason to shift it, which is interesting. That's the
I can see
phrase that they
why,
chose.
because the afternoon grand final is very much a more family oriented time slot.
Yeah.
So it does, it is technically more eyes on the footy. It makes it easy for children to go to the grand final if there's an opportunity for them. That sort of stuff mostly.
Mm. Yeah, but as I said, I think it's just important to get that time and locked in early. And I guess it also just comes in with like some of the other, you know, news and worldwide events, how they're being a bit proactive with, with the way, fuel prices are heading and all that, trying to get proactive in like talking about, oh, what will we do if, there's like a fuel thing, and just anything to do with the uncertainty of times. Like to have it like locked in early, let people buy their tickets as soon as possible, and accommodate, I think is a good thing. That's more for like this year and not just letting it like, muck it around until like halfway during the year where it's normally announced. So, yeah, I think that should be good. And as I said, like I'm all for the afternoon. It starts a tiny bit early in WA, but you just like have a AFL Grand Final lunch, and it's really good. And yeah, as I said, the kids get to watch it. And as I said, if it's crap, you've got the night to forget about it.
Yep.
And if your team wins, you got the night to celebrate it.
Yep, exactly right. All right, let's jump over now to the week that has just gone. Starting off with a Thursday night clash in Geelong. So obviously Geelong is hosting against the Adelaide Crows, and with an 8-point margin, Geelong win out 9-14-68 to 9-6-60.
Yeah, and this is one of the very messy games for the week. I don't actually mind the way that this game was played because it was very wet. Both teams had a lot of pressure, and it was a very fun, close game, albeit scrappy, with the controversial finish. Who would have thought that Adelaide, again, on the wrong side of the whistle? But, as I said, Geelong technically had time, possession, and entries. But it was very impressive how Adelaide's defence held strong.
Mm-hmm.
They did have a few defensive turnovers that opened the door. There were a lot of repeat entries because the kicks outside of football were just getting turned over. Again, that was more just due to the pressure. And, as I said, the hard. There wasn't that much avenue for uncontested possession for Adelaide. So, you know what I mean? On the flip side, Geelong could only score 3 points from outside the forward half. So in neutral, as I said, Adelaide, they were very impressive, but Geelong also just sort of formatted their game to just lock them in the forward half, and they did that pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, I actually thought Adelaide were fairly skillful in the wet conditions. They just didn't have the offensive ball winning capabilities Geelong did. Smith and Manor, I thought, were the big game difference for the two teams. Martin was very good with his polish. Rochelle for Adelaide had a fantastic game, almost broke the game wide open. And Zach Taylor, he was very nice with his few goals in fairly hard conditions, especially for the Dolls. Zach Taylor sort of being an in-betweener. Winger, sometimes goes forward and takes a few good marks. But yeah, very solid effort by him.
Yeah, I did get to see the second half of this game. There was a big storm that kind of rolled through my area that night, and it woke me up. And I couldn't get back to sleep, so I ended up just putting the footy on. Yeah, I definitely noticed Mana's presence a lot. He coasted a lot up forward and played a lot of heavy time through that midfield. Of course, that's what he does. But the fact that he was able to just be so clean with it in the conditions and had zero issue with conversion made such a difference. Even though, 9-14 is acceptable in wet conditions, it is an ideal score balance scenario. But like that when, when Jeremy Cameron, is struggling a bit in the wet conditions, you got to rely on your smaller forwards. And Sean Manor being able to do what he does and be so composed even when it's like a slippery mess out there is fantastic. It's such a rare skill set to find.
Yeah, and as I said, it's like the smalls, like on ground level, they just definitely lifted where it wasn't quite the same with Adelaide, who were like good with their fewer entries. It was more just, as I said, they were they required a bit more working out, whereas at Geelong were just like completely trying to strong arm. You can tell from their setup that they were just trying to lock the ball in the forward half. They took their shots very quickly. There wasn't too much, what do you call it? There wasn't too much quality control, I suppose. They were just getting on the boot, which you need to do in tough conditions. There's no problem with that. But as I said, it was good to see Adelaide keep up with them. I guess, that's sort of where we just come to with Adelaide, because, as I said, it's really hard to tell exactly what to think of them. As I said, Adelaide played well. Their momentum was obviously halted by the wrong call. We'll talk about that in a second. You know what I mean? Like, Adelaide really controlling, but they just don't have as much offensive edge as they did last year.
Yeah.
As I said, it's very hard to say that they're like far off the mark considering the teams they've played. Honestly, it's just getting a few more plays in the contest offensively. And, again, that was a bit hard when they were limited in selection. So, as I said, I wouldn't take too much away from Adelaide. Geelong, again, scrapping into a good win. They're starting to look a bit more impressive. But, as I said, again, we got to talk about that call. Like, do you think it's a bit of an overreaction, what some people are, talking about? Because as I said, like, for all the calls that Adelaide got screwed over, like, that was, like, I get, on slowed down replay, it was fairly obvious. I could definitely see at certain angles, like live, why you might think the ball came off the Adelaide foot. Like, and, when you get that, so they're like, oh, won your whole play. Like, well, if the umpire's certain, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's wrong.
But,
the umpires would be terrible if they went in thinking every call had the chance to be wrong. You know what I mean?
Exactly right.
The game would just
if you're having to second guess yourself in every decision, you're not meant to be an umpire. Like, the whole point, and the arc and stuff like that is only meant to be used if the umpire is genuinely unsure.
Yeah, like I said, they're talking about all this talk about callbacks, and honestly, and teams would just rush in to take the kick, and it's like, yeah, but we're talking about a minuscule fraction of decisions. Like, this is probably like how often have we had that close, call of umpires beats? Like, that's going to happen once every 4 or 5 rounds, and it's only in this rare instance because of Adelaide Murphy's Law luck that it happened to be a decision that cost them, not even cost them the game, but heavily turned the tide against them.
Yeah, there's not even any guarantee that if this decision was made correctly, that it would have won them the game. Because the reality of it is, Geelong's defense was still holding up. Adelaide were really struggling by that fourth quarter to get solid inside 50s, purely because of how wet the conditions were and their forwards. Apart from Rochelle, even though I think at the time Rochelle might have been on the bench, we're just having really rough kind of impact.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, I do think the biggest thing is a shame is I'm pretty sure, what was it? I'm pretty sure it was Isaac Rankin, wasn't it? He kicked the goal to get him in front. That was a beautiful one.
Yeah, it was Rankin. Yeah.
Oh, no, sorry. No, it was Neil Bullen.
Oh, yeah, no, that's right. It was Neil Bullen.
Okay, maybe it's a different goal I'm thinking of.
I couldn't remember.
But as I said,
who kicked what at the end.
Yeah. But, at the end of the day, as I said, it is what it is. Think that, as I said, it just sucks that it's always Adelaide.
It does.
I know,
I think it's funny that it's always Adelaide, but it also sucks that it's always Adelaide.
Yeah, as I said, they just don't have that luck in close games. But again, I also think it's a bit how Adelaide play. You know what I mean? Adelaide, they're probably as more of a restriction team as you can get. And when you do make games into a scrappier close contest, you know what I mean? The lower the margin is, the more that one score is going to matter. And the more that one score is going to matter means the more that umpires can sort of influence that outcome. And I'm not trying to say that the Crows have brought on themselves or anything. But I just think sometimes you ride a bit of that luck. But, if you believe in your system enough, and the system's been pretty good for Adelaide, I don't think it will worry them too much. I think they're more worried about making sure that their attacking consistency stays strong for the finals. And yeah, I think that this one, compared to how they played last finals, where they're like, oh, they're able to stop, but their attack were absolutely quelled.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, I think they are finding a few more different avenues, which is good. It might help them later in the year. So even though they're not getting the wins, I still think they're fairly healthy. They should still feature well once the run gets easier.
You know how, like a year or two back, there was talk of the Essendon Edge? I think the Adelaide Crows ended up getting that because that's kind of the way that they play. Is that like when they're on, they're a very ruthless team, especially in that forward half. But also again, they're very restrictive. They know how to defend and protect their space. So I think
Yeah,
Adelaide might have that kind of like energy that the Bombers were originally going to have back then and currently do not. We will talk about that.
sure. I had thought, and I don't know if you've like heard of this, but have you ever heard of like a Motte and Bailey before? It's the way
No.
castles used to be designed. So basically, Motte and Baileys were like you would have this big open area, and that's where you would all like hang around and all that. You have your marker spells, whatever, and then there would just be like this big wind up into the castle. So enemies are like, oh, everyone's out in the open, we'll attack, and then everyone retreats up to the higher ground and just like counters attack very efficiently. And I think that's almost what the Adelaide tend to do. Like they allow teams to get meter edge. They allow teams to go into the side their forward. They just rack up a lot of intercepts from the back half, and
They do.
it's very interesting because like they're one of the few teams where, again, it's like if you had the Bulldogs, and we sort of saw that with that game, is that like they'll run all over you if they get the ball, but like a team against like a team like Adelaide can actually defend that fairly well. And Geelong, as I said, they're more on the outside. They had a lot of players contributing fantastic. Like Bailey Smith's impact was absolutely huge.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Myers was still fantastic on the wings. Max Holmes still had a lot of rebound. And yet, as I said, it was still like a 9-14 game. Like none of it happened to have that clinicalness. And it wasn't through lack of effort or lack of system. It's just like that's sort of how Adelaide's designed. They try and get that back half rebound. And the weather today means that they didn't actually send it to the forward half. They had to be a bit more creative. But,
Yes.
yeah, as I said, they are one of the strongest defensive teams, but just doesn't come from their midfield. Like it's a very back half based, which again, I also say it's a bit of a dangerous game, but it's worked for 1.5 years. Yeah,
Something like that.
Yeah, as I said, they should be fine.
Yeah.
And it's at Geelong.
Exactly.
Uh,
Geelong are just playing the way we know them to play, essentially. Like we can't really.
yeah, and I think too. Very interesting ruck battle as well. As I said, very spread out.
Oh yes.
Putting in Mitch Edwards to have a little hits. But Lachlan McAndrew, I want to spend a little talking about. Have we seen the last of Riley O'Brien now? Because he's come in, had some really fantastic games. Absolutely, was it Tom DeConing he absolutely wiped the floor with, or something like that? Was Adelaide versus St Kilda last week? I can't remember.
I've already forgotten. I'll
It was
be
one
honest.
of the Adelaide games. Yeah. Anyway, so he's had a pretty great start to the season. He's a bit more mobile. Yeah, as I said, Tim English actually. I think he did really well against. And Darcy Cameron in the first game.
That's right.
Big test going up against Fremantle. As I said, it's yeah, I think we're going to see Lachlan McAndrew like just just cement himself in the first rock because I've been very impressive with the way he's gone about it.
Yeah. That is a really interesting question. I don't think we've seen the last of Rob as of yet. But I think this could
I'd be
potentially
surprised
be
if
his last year as a Crow.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if Mac Andrews had enough time to had enough tank to surpass the year. But as I said, it's been very impressive in terms of, hit out stats and all that sort of thing. Had solid, what is it? Still had 8 hitouts to advantage, led the night for that. Hit out win percent was 50%. A couple of centre clearance, stoppage clearances, it's fairly well rounded. Like, not the best user of the ball, but for a young rock, he's getting involved, and that's the main thing you want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a last little tidbit on this game before we move on. After the MRO, Max Holmes was fined $1,000 for contact with an umpire. It really is back.
Yeah, as I said. Players, they never learn.
Yep.
Paying for the end of the season trip early.
Yep, pretty much.
Right. Should we jump over to Marvel? I'm still in Victoria.
Yeah. This is the stadium down the road that no one that lives at the MCG likes to travel through, especially Collingwood. But they hosted the Giants at Marvel Stadium this week, and with a 33-point margin, Collingwood did win out 13-9-87 to 7-12-54.
Yeah, and no one really was surprised by this margin. GWS have a lot of injuries. Collingwood, playing okay up against some pretty good teams. But yeah, as I said, it must be hard being a GWS Giants fan at the moment because, statistically, they're doing a lot of things, maybe not right, but better than they did last year.
Mm-hmm.
Like last year, GWS, and for the last couple, they're a team that struggled to get the ball inside 50. And they had some absolutely fantastic conversion once they got in there. Whereas now they win the ball where they do it quite well considering they're out. So they get inside their forward 50, and their forward structure has absolutely plummeted this year. The tolls are flounderings. They've got less inside 50s than you would want from their entries. And I think one of the interesting stats from this game is their movement from D50 to forward 50 was 42.1%. Collingwood just let the ball go through. And yet they were outscored in defensive half. They only scored 3-4 from defensive half chains. So that's pretty much it for the Giants. They had no problem moving the ball, but once it got in there, and granted, the Collingwood are a bit like the Crows in the sense that, they don't actually mind the ball going inside 50. We did see big stack Billy Frampton absolutely smother pretty much Jesse Hogan.
Mm-hmm.
And, the occasional times he floated on other players. Even Darcy Moore, injured. They still found a way to keep him or keep the defensive system going despite him clearly playing quite hobbled. Jeremy Howe also having a pretty, reserved but solid defensively game on Gruetsky. Probably again, playing just okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's too surprising that Jeremy Howe had a fairly quiet game, considering, he's basically nursing an injury, even though he did just miss a few games for an injury. Yeah. So, I don't know if this is just, trying to, again, ease him back in, or if they're just saying, this could be your last year. Do you want to just send it? So, who knows what's going on there?
Yeah, but as I said, it was just so, frustrating because... And it was very weird because I don't know if you heard this, I heard from, GWS. And you see these titles all the time. It's GWS was saying, oh, we're going to make sure that we, play players at AFL standard, yada, yada, yada. We're going to make a few changes. And then the only change they made was, what was it? The forward that wasn't even too bad. Harry Royston, they drop. Meanwhile, as I said, Callum Brown still gets a game.
Yeah.
Jake Riccardi still gets a game. Admittedly, he wasn't too bad. Still makes some baffling errors occasionally. Xavier O'Hallahan, I haven't been overly that impressed with. And as I said, and it's just interesting. I know they don't have a lot of depth to play with. I know that they've got a few injuries, but, I always think it's funny, when a coach makes that statement, I think the worst thing you can do is just make a token change. And as I said, I think GWS still have some fine tuning to go because again, they've got part way there. They've got some players playing fairly well. Connor Iden is having an absolutely fantastic season.
Mm-hmm.
Clayton Oliver's found a new home. Harvey Thomas, again, bloody GWS is like they find a fast, decent ball distributor on the wing, and they have a fantastic season, nearly all Australian, and they normally get injured straight afterwards. It happened with what's his name? Brent
That's
Daniels.
right. Yep.
Happened with the speed star Darcy James, and we hope it doesn't happen to Harvey Thomas. But it is funny that he is taking that role.
It also did
with
not, even though he's very much more of an inside on ball player, but it basically happened to Tom Green as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like Tom Green started to get a bit more impact with his disposal, and then as I said, he just falls apart, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I mean, on the flip side, we'll talk a bit about Collingwood. They were fine. I honestly thought that their inside 50s were like really good considering what we know about their forward line.
Mm-hmm.
Like, McStay's chipping in a bit here and there. I think Tim Embry, absolutely fantastic. Again, Giants have lost their key defenders. There's no surprise that he can get off the chain a bit, but I thought he did really well. And as I said, it's just about getting all those other midfielders and wider people involved because Collingwood do have a fantastic outside game. And although it's not great that they have to rely on it, it is good to see them getting a healthy amount of goals from midfielders as well. And obviously Oscar Steen, the debutant ruck, opened up the centre bounce for Collingwood. He had some fantastic taps. He does seem to be a bit of a burst player. I think he's, going to build a bit of that tank.
Mm-hmm.
But, his creativity, with what we've seen in the ruck, you only need to take a chunk of the centre bounces, give Darcy Cameron a bit of a break, and just opens up another avenue of scoring that we weren't quite expecting this year for Collingwood.
Yeah, well, like it's not to say that Darcy Cameron's been a slouch at all. Like he's been like one of their best rucks over the past 10 years or however long he's played. But Oscar Steen, for a debut game, like fantastic from him. Considering he's working inside of a unit that is still missing a fair few pieces, isn't at 100% efficiency. And is still able to have such a huge impact both in the forward line, even when he floats down to defense. You're probably right that he is a bit of a burst player, so he might spend a little bit more time on the bench than some rucks would. For example, like you see players like Gawn, Nankervis, etc. Like just only on the bench for 2-3 minutes at a time, and then they'll go back out. But I don't think it's a bad idea at all to because we've seen burst players throughout the generations.
Yeah.
But having trying being a ruck and being a burst player, I think is a really interesting way to approach the game.
Yeah, because as I said, because obviously people ruckmen don't have that much impact. We've seen the centre bounce be exposed. Centre bounce scoring's gone higher, and you know what I mean. Oscar Steen, you're building him up for the future, and it's he plays 60% this game, but if he has a bad matchup, playing 40 to 50%. You've still got old reliable Darcy Cameron. He played 68% a game, still going fine. Disposal dropped off a tiny bit, but otherwise is still Darcy Cameron. Great defensively, can sometimes back up forward. There's no issue there. It's just as I said, for a team that's struggling to, or we thought that might be struggling to score, it's good to see they've gone aggressive and tried unearth something. And it's only one game, but Oscar Steen, really good. By comparison, Kieran Breeks is probably a ruckman who's really struggling with the new ruck changes. Technically okay with ball, but definitely, just beaten in the contest and around the ground.
Yeah, it's now that we've had a little bit bigger of a sample size as in regards to the new ruck changes, I definitely think it's impacted some teams a lot differently than we may have expected. It's kind of shown how aggressive some rucks can be in the center bounce, and how being forced to kind of keep a position with the ball going up does in fact impact how how efficient you can be at the centre bounce. Whereas you look at it, with stoppages, it's like the game hasn't really changed at all.
No, exactly. You know what I mean? It's like the center bounce, I think it just shapes like the positioning and the ruck battle, like it changes. Like it's not only about the tap, it's how you present on the ground as well, like how you impact the contest, not only with your tap, but with your positioning afterwards. And as I said, we've seen the less mobile ruckman create contests that just open up a bit too much space. Again, these are AFL quality ruckman. They'll find a way to sort of mitigate that. I'm not saying you never play a player like who were I talking about again? Kieran Briggs again. Like he'll work it out. Like he's just not having as big an impact. Like he wasn't even that terrible, but you know what I mean? Just like he did get beaten by a young kid.
Yeah.
Which you don't like as a ruckman.
No, you don't. But yeah, jumping over to the injury list now. Scott Pendlebury came off with Achilles tightness. Again, he'll probably just be nursed through a lot of this year, similar to what they did with Dustin Fletcher before he retired. Just to ensure that he hit 400. Obviously, Pendles is already over that, but they're trying to nurse him to the all-time games record and trying to beat Boomer Harvey off
Is
of
it
that.
417?
I think it's 432.
Something like that.
Boomer Harvey has the record.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that makes sense.
He'll be nursed through a lot of this year, just to try and get ever closer to that record. Ryan Angwin had a burst eardrum. I do not know how. I assume it's some sort of collision.
He banged his head from a contest.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, no, it was sort of a knock. He went off. We thought he was getting assessed for concussion, but he was getting assessed for his ear, really. Head clash with Maynard, apparently.
Why is it always Maynard?
To be fair,
Maynard and affecting a player's head. Why is it like?
Yeah.
Why do I have two nipples?
Yeah, as I said, smoke their fire maybe, but yeah, I wouldn't quite be writing Maynard off my Christmas card list unless he was already off, which is likely.
He is a queer ally, so I can't fault him too much.
Yeah.
And then Finn Callahan came off with a dislocated finger. I think he played out the rest of the game, but that will be assessed during the week as to whether it's like a surgery thing or just, pop it back in and be fine. Because finger injuries are very, 50-50.
Yeah, as I said, you don't see them too often, but, sometimes, if they're bad, you might have to come off with some sort of, finger strapping. And again, if it's really this can cause more damage, you might need surgery, which tends to be a month. We hope that that's not the case.
I don't think it
doesn't seem likely from what we've heard.
Should be all right. And then over on the MRO side of things, Ben McCreary was fined $1,000 for contact with an umpire, and Ned Long was fined $1,000 for striking Clayton Oliver.
Yeah. So we go on to the title referential Saturday. And as I said, these two games didn't exactly set the world on fire. And yet, the standard that was given to us on Saturday football, it was pretty dire. It wasn't not entertaining. We're talking about St Kilda and Brisbane, which did have a bit of an entertaining patch, especially in the last half. But yeah, some of this was pretty hard to watch at times.
Yeah, these Saturday games were not very entertaining for quite a few reasons. But yes, we jump back over to Marvel Stadium a bit later in the day. The day after. This is the start of the Saturday game. But this was was an early game. This was a 12:30 game, Eastern time, 11:30 Queensland time, 9:30 Perth time. Time zones are weird right now, okay? But St Kilda hosting the Brisbane Lions, and with a 33-point margin, the Lions win out 17-11-113 to 11-14-80.
So, St Kilda, we've seen 4 games from them so far, with a 1-3 record.
Yes,
that seems right.
That is correct.
Just beat GWS last week, and it is so hard to really tell whether we should get excited about their potential or not, because we've seen them nullify some teams really well. We've seen them have some pretty okay ball movements and defensive efforts, but they just don't get the impact or conversion that they need to when things are going their way. And, being a fairly young and rebuilding team, we saw Brisbane, just keep with them. They weren't playing fantastically. Everyone was turning the ball over. And you know what? Yeah, there was just only small bright spots. Ryan kicked 3 very early, helped the Saints actually build on their score. Berry, he had a really fun tagging job on Naz. He didn't actually nullify him all that much, but it did really bring him into the game. I think we talked about this last week. Sometimes you got to think of tagging not as always pure restriction, but getting other players involved in the game.
Yeah, we did. We talked about the comparison to, rather than being a hard tagger, to being a run with player. And I can't remember what team specifically this was about.
I think this was against Melbourne, Tholstrup tagging Sarong.
Yes, it was. That's correct. So yeah, it's like sometimes you don't have to be a hard tag. You don't need to be a player to can nullify an influence of another. Sometimes you just need to be a run with player, and that way you can utilize more. I guess more of the rules of the AFL, and that you can let them get possession, but then you can just immediately tackle them and either cause a stoppage or you get a free kick out of it. There are 2 ways to be able to play that sort of role.
Or if you're tagging someone like Naz, he's a very skilled player, but he's not like a contest beast. You're still probably okay in the 50-50 on the ground against him, as long as you're got enough speed in the contest. Obviously, if Naz gets a head start, he's very fast with his collect and carry. Anyway, I was just saying, as I said, Nas is doing well. Berry was running with him, fairly fun. And Wilkie, pillar in defense, absolutely fantastic.
Oh, yes.
But as I said,
I was a very big fan of the work that Wilkie did during this game. As much as it's not surprising that Brisbane did end up winning out, I think Cal Wilkie, Isaac Keeler, and even Silvani all still had fantastic defensive games, all things considered.
Yeah, it was for a good half, they were very much on top. I don't think you mean Isaac Keeler. He was out. Taru played defense.
Sorry, Taru was floating in defense this week. That's right.
And Dukes was back.
Oh yeah, Dougal
too.
Howard.
I forgot about that.
The legend himself,
former Port player and child doctor. Yeah. So they were quite. I wouldn't say dominant because Brisbane also missed a few chances. Their accuracy massively swung in the second half. But you know what I mean is they had so much things going for them and they only had a bit to show for it. And then once Brisbane, managed to get the contest on their terms because that sort of fell, especially in that last quarter. It's hard to tell because Saints put a lot of work, so maybe it is just them getting tired.
They did have to contend with a lot of inside 50s from the Lions, to be fair.
Yeah. Well, as I said, even when you do good defensive work, that's hard to maintain for an entire course of the game. But the fact is, Brisbane just walked all over him. If you were just a very casual observer, you would just think that the Saints just gave up. They're no, it's too hard. Stuff.
There's definitely a game coming up that feels exactly like that. I will be honest with you.
Yeah, I sort of understand where that's coming from. But yeah, as I said, it's just, the big question mark for the Saints is, they spend all this money on players and you know what, that's fine. Tom De Koning is still a question mark, whether that was worth enough money. We'll talk a bit about his synergy with Marshall to start the year. But you know what I mean? It's just the Saints, they're a team where, apart from Naz, I don't really care particularly if too many players... Okay, maybe a bit more than Naz, but too many players have ball in hand. I think Naz, if he has the ball in hand, he might do some damage. Sinclair 50-50. Maxwell's shown a tiny bit, and then Jack Higgins.
I think Sinclair does have a lot of impact, and is a very smart footballer. But it's whether but it's whether like he's going to like make an offensive decision or a defensive decision as to like whether that's going to
Yeah, well,
have any
like in the
impact.
system, you know what I mean? Like in the system, it's like, yeah, Sinclair can like rack off halfback possessions and like, not have too much of an impact. Like he's making the best decision available. It's just like their system, like that decision isn't going to amount to much offense.
Yeah,
Same with the middle. As I said, the Saints really shifted a bunch of money around to have a mediocre centre bounce squad. At least defensively. Like they do some good defensive work. But you know what I mean? Is like again, if that defensive work is running around doing hard efforts just to get rolled over in the last half of the game, like does it really matter? You know? Like a system at the end of the day has to give you some sort of win.
yeah,
And
that's true.
the Saints don't really get that.
No, they were lucky to get it last week against the Giants after the fourth quarter the Giants had.
Yeah.
Last week, week
Because it's
before,
like
whenever it
that was a
was,
huge
whenever their
swing.
win was. Oh, I think it was 2 weeks ago. But like, yeah, the point is like,
Yeah.
their, their system, whilst it works in bursts, is not a 4-quarter
Yeah.
system. I don't think.
No, as I said, we saw the match against Collingwood. They got some late games. Melbourne, they sort of drifted away with. And obviously, we're going to talk about another team with a more exaggerated version of this problem. But, as I said, I think the difference of what we're going to talk about is, for this one, it's more, I guess, like a specific defensive problem, in that it's like they're not bad defensively. It's just, they make some decisions that just don't amount to anything. As I said, like I don't think like they care that Dunkley or McCluggage, McCluggage wasn't even playing, sorry. Or a few others there mids just don't have the best game, or that Wilk Ashcroft takes a while to get involved. When I said it's not damaging them on the scoreboard.
Yeah, like I don't think Brisbane, really all that fast. If some players have quiet games, especially like their quote unquote biggest stars, purely for the fact that they have a system that works, and they have proof of that over playing 3 grand finals in the past 4 years and winning 2 of them.
Yeah.
So like they have enough there, and we also know that they are very much like an extremely adaptable team. Like they have been able to change how they play on the fly really, really well, and that is a credit to obviously to Fags and his coaching staff for the most part.
Yeah.
One thing I want to touch on just before you cover a little bit extra is Sam Draper.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we've seen a little bit more of him as a Lion, what are your thoughts on how he kind of fits into this team?
Oh man, honestly, I didn't mind it too much. Like Darcy Fort is a very solid ruckman. He's your meat and potato sort of thing. And then we just saw times where Sam Draper just went in and did his own thing. I think one thing he's got to work on, especially with the our line system, is just not giving away as many free kicks. I think that when you're such a dominant team in stoppages and on ground, like giving away a ruck infringement is just like saying, okay, let's take away our best avenue of the game. And it was only free kicks, but like some of them were a bit, that's just always been a problem of his. But yeah, as I said, it's like what was this his first game or second game? I can't really remember last week.
I know he started the season injured, but so this might. And they had the bye last week. They did.
Oh yeah, okay.
So this might have been his first game for the season.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I thought it was good. Like pretty much faster than Oscar Allen sort of taken to this system. Oscar Allen had like a bit of the ball, but wasn't that impressive. But again, doesn't really need to. Like he can take some time working into it.
Yeah, he missed a fair amount of footy. Especially over the course of last season. So it's no surprise it'll still take him a little bit to work his way into the Brisbane system. But otherwise, this is so far a very solid performance. And we've seen some of their players that have come back from injury recently have a bigger impact this game.
Yeah, I mean, Kid in Coleman, he had some absolutely mammoth moments in the last quarter. He was doing a really good job on halfback, and then like they say he switched forward, but I think he just sort of ran forward, just from hard running.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like he was able to stretch the ground, and as I said, as St Kilda tied out, they weren't able to run with him as much. Um, we saw also Link McCarthy get a fair bit involved. Some nice scoring involvements, a bit messy off his own foot. But as I said, his intent and his uh positioning was pretty good. So no, as I said, just like to give a little shout out to those two because again, as I said, we know that Brisbane are so good on the outside, and you said Keating Coleman like as run and dash, like Brisbane haven't really had that overly that much over the last 2 years.
No, not
As I said,
really.
we've known them as being strong intercept markers that just transition the football through switches. So to add Keating Coleman will add a feather to their bow. But as we're going to talk about, they are going to have to reorganize their defense because they have some pains coming up as you cover the injuries and match reports.
Yes. So obviously, we already know that Payne is already on the injury side of things. He's out for a little bit of time. So they're already missing one key player. But Darcy Gardner is joining him now on the sidelines with a shoulder injury after just coming back from an injury, which is not great for him. Other injuries, of course, include Noah Answorth with concussion from that unfortunate high flying mark. It was a fantastic mark, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, he got hit kind of badly in the head on the outside of it. So that's not good. I know the AFL were kind of looking at seeing if they could actually do like something about it, but I'm glad they kind of haven't because it was basically a football act. Like in this case, these things
Yeah.
very, very rarely are going to happen. But it just
I
sucks for
think it's
him.
one of those things where if you had a player that repeatedly caused that sort of injury, I would like the AFL to stay, like, get in. But
Yeah, absolutely.
like Liam Ryan, he is normally fairly. I mean, he goes for. Honestly, he sometimes takes too many speckies and he should.
Flying Ryan for a
Sometimes he goes
reason.
too early. Yeah. But he's normally fairly good with his technique, and as I said, this is just one where it went a bit wrong. No malice, but yeah, as I said, it is still a shame that Noah Answorth, will miss the next game, and was ruled out due to concussion.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. And then on the Kilda side of things, Cooper Sharman is also out with concussion. I think it was just this one was I think just an awkward clash, in a contest that kind of just ended awkwardly for him. But it's not, again these things do happen.
Yeah, which is a shame. He had a really good first half.
I think
I don't
generally, I
think
think
like that
so far
was the
this season,
difference.
even though St Kilda has only won one game, like he's really like come into his own so far this year as a forward. Like I think he's doing some fairly decent work.
Yeah, there's a few games where it's been a bit up and down, but like, yeah, it's had some better moments. Like, he's definitely he's at least trying to impose a bit more. Like, I think that was the thing is like, you had, who's the other one down there? Owens,
Mitch
and
Owens, yeah.
Sharman, and they can do good things, but they're not players that really stretch a
Mm.
defense. Like, yeah, you have to have a player fast enough to like go with them, but like honestly, I think a defender's like, if you have those, you're like, oh, I can probably like impact on more contests with these players. Whereas I said, I think Sharman, his delivery and marking was requiring a bit more attention than that, which was good.
Yeah, it's why I think
As I said, just a bit disappointing.
like last week against the Giants with like, when you have Naz floating up there, when you have Taru floating up in the forward line, I think it makes such a bigger
Mm,
impact rather than having to rely on your forwards who, whilst have been in the system for quite a while now, are still young and somewhat
yeah.
inexperienced.
Well, as I said, I mean, we can rag on Saints all we want. They are missing their key forward.
Yeah, but
Whether
they've been missing
by
him
now they should have
for like
invested in
3 years
more.
at this point.
Yeah, well, as I said, whether they should have invested more is a bit of a questionable thing. It is hard to get key players in the draft, but like, as I said, they've gone with this, floaty on the ground structure, and like it does work at times, but yeah, they're such a patchy team because of it. And that's why I said and you're the same boat too, probably a bit harsher, I think. Why we didn't really like buy into too much of the like pure Saints hype. They
Yeah,
do some good things, and I think they do good with the list that they have. But like, they're also like, I think why they made the moves was sort of to make their best better rather than make them more consistent.
pretty much. I agree with that.
Which we've seen at times, but like they're still 1-3
Yeah.
despite
So
playing
they have had
occasionally reasonably good football.
yeah, again, like they're basically like a burst team. Like they're good in patches,
Yeah.
but currently don't have a four quarter system. All right, jumping over to the MRO. Sam Draper was fined $2,000 for forceful front on contact against Nads, and Liam Ryan was fined $1,000 for being an instigator of a melee. Sometime in the second quarter, I think. So there you go. All right.
Yeah.
This next game will be a bit of a short game to cover because honestly there isn't too much to talk about in this one. I didn't even see it.
Yeah.
I did see. I think I did see a little bit of like the first half, but I didn't really get to watch much else. But it is Fremantle and Richmond over at Optus with a 60-point margin. Take a guess at who won out. It was Fremantle. 13-25, 103 to 6-7, 43.
Yeah, apparently they said like the 7th time there's been a 13-25 score tally, which is weird, but also, kind of cool. Yeah.
I mean, you can tell
this
it was definitely wet weather footy when you kick 25 behind.
Even
though
yeah,
some of them,
exactly.
some of them were rushed, that I am aware of. But
yeah,
like 25 behinds is like horrendous if this was a closer game.
Yeah, as I said, there was like some mediocre kicking for sure. But as I said, to start with, despite the scoreline, we do have to mention that the Tigers did have a really nice 5-goal second quarter. They hit the lead just before halftime, which was quickly quelled by 2 quick goals for Freo before the halftime siren, unfortunately. And it was all downhill from there because only Jonty Fall in junk time would add a goal to the Tigers' tally. I thought Taranto and Ross led the game from the front from what I heard. I sort of was listening to this game on radio because my dad was watching it on the main KO. Yeah, as I said, it just wasn't pretty. But yeah, so Taranto and Ross led from the front. Probably didn't have too many players around them, but I think their ball winning ability was sort of a bit better than last week, where they're winning the ball and weren't doing overly too much about it with it. But yeah, as I said, Fremantle were pretty well rounded. They didn't really have too many passengers, and as I said, apart from scoring, all the systems was working. And it's it's going to be interesting because Richmond are in a bit of a hole. They have some winnable games coming up. But we just wonder if they have the troops that are going to make them be competitive. Because they're missing Nankervis for a chunk of those winnable games. The few plays here and there, Tom Lynch, obviously the other big one. So I think, as I said, I'm not going to talk too much about this game. But yeah, I think they're smalls. As I said, I think I mentioned this in numerous times. But yeah, they're going to have to take a bit of a St Kilda approach if they're going to win games. Because they're not going to get inside their forward 50, and when they are, they're just going at an okay goal scoring rate.
For what I did end up seeing, I think Steely Green had a fantastic game, all things considered. Whenever the ball did actually end up in the forward 50, I am very sad. I'm just going to mention the injury now because it's only one, but I'm very sad that Jasper Olga did a knee injury because I think he's actually been doing some really really solid work. Both when he's been in the team and from what I've seen of him in the VFL. So it's really unfortunate that he's going to be missing a chunk of time there. I am surprised that we didn't bring in an actual ruck for this game when you're going up against 2 of the best rucks in the competition. With no Nankervis, I think we used a bit of McKelty and we used someone else.
Yeah.
As
so the hit out tally was Campbell Gray with 5.
That's right.
Mike Kelty Lafau with 2. And Ben Miller with 2. Compared to 28 for Luke Jackson and 29 to...
yeah, that's about what I expected.
Sean Darcy. The clearances ended up being 41 to 26. So, not actually the worst for the week in terms of differential, but, still beaten.
The weather probably had a bit of a factor in that. But, yeah, the lack of... The lack of hitouts is definitely not surprising in the slightest. So we've got Ollie Hayes Brown who we've had for almost 2 years now, year and a half maybe. Who are, from what I've seen of him in the VFL, he's like really really doing some good work. So I'm surprised we didn't bring him in for this one, even though the scoreline probably still would have been similar regardless. But like getting that experience at an AFL level does actually make a difference in development. And I think we have someone else on the list as well, that I'm currently blanking, who like is an actual rock. Um, like obviously I know
Yeah,
we've
we
got a
talked
bunch of
about it
tall
last week.
forwards, but like they're not actual rocks, so I'm like that's fine. Plus they're all young.
Yeah.
Like oh actually I it's not on the injury list because it's not a part of the match report. But Jonty Fall will miss at least a week. Um for an injury that was reported like much later post game. So there's a fair chance we
Hmm.
could bring in Liam Fawcett, who has only played one match in the past like 18 months, and that was against Port Adelaide, the one that we were at.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
he could play again this week, again against Port Adelaide. Who knows? Um, but otherwise, yeah, like we don't have like a huge amount of tall options that can play rock fairly well.
Yeah. Nah, as I said, it's like what you bring Samson Ryan in, and
I
as I
mean, we
said,
could bring Samson Ryan.
the
As much as
deal.
I love my goat, I don't think he's gonna last much longer in an AFL system. I will be honest with you.
No, yeah. Yeah, as I said, he's just a bit. Yeah, I think he would need more forward capabilities for him to survive in the Richmond system,
Like
and he's just been a sink
he's got the
in the
height
forward
for it,
line.
which is great. But he doesn't
Hmm.
have the build. Like he doesn't have like the bigger body
Nah,
to really sustain as a ruck position, which sucks. Because I know he has had
yeah,
some fantastic games over the years, but like yeah, it's just it's an unfortunate that when ruck options just don't work out.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Um, yeah, as I said, Freeman, it was wet weather. Like, as bad as the goal shooting was, like, there wasn't too many players that had, like, bad X scores or anything. I think Jackson and Voss were, like, the only ones to miss sitters. So I don't think, like, um, overall Fremantle actually care all that much. But, yeah, they probably could have won by, I mean, they probably could have been nearing 100. Like, I don't think they would have made it there. Like I said, behinds make more scoring chains by the way that this game was being played because, Richmond, pretty bad users of the ball,
Yeah,
get defensive half turnovers after behinds.
yeah. Realistically, for
So,
Freo, this should have been a lot more of a percentage game, but it can be mostly forgiven for it being still wet weather footy.
yeah, I reckon 10 to 20 points were left on the board realistically. But I don't think they're going to care too much.
No, no, I don't think they're too fussed at all.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, Bolton, again, played fantastic against his
yes,
former team.
he did. I did see some of his performance. He was fantastic for Freo. Again, Freo as a whole, have looked really solid these first couple of weeks.
Yeah,
So, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they track when they come up against some of the tougher opponents in the league.
yeah. Like they match up well against Geelong. They did the job against Melbourne, and yeah, as I said, apart from maybe some, as I said, that one back half performance against Geelong where they were playing really well, and as I said, Geelong might just be one of the better teams in the competition playing at home. As I said, not too much they've done wrong.
No, not at all. All right, let's jump back over to Marvel Stadium now for the afternoon game. Actually, it's the night game. Sorry, you did take these screenshots in first
Hmm.
time. Um, the night game for the Saturday, with the Bombers hosting North Melbourne, and with a 12-point margin, the Kangaroos by now getting their second win of the season. Uh, yes, that
Yep,
is
two
correct.
on one.
Um, with a 12-9-81 to 9-15-69.
And it was a lackluster night, to be honest. The Roos, at least, it's just like the Roos weren't damaging enough for how much possession they had. But the Dons also had like a fair bit of territory. They just like handballed it into trouble and left a lot of goals on the board. The only highlights of this game were some of the North Melbourne kids. Dersma, Blamiers, Trembuff, Sullivan, O'Sullivan, I should say, were absolutely terrific. But yeah, for most of this night, this was just like Essendon taking the ball to half forward, starting a weird dinky handball chain, blazing it away in their forward half, having like a weird forced shot on goal, and North Melbourne just like turning it over somewhere across the wing. When North Melbourne did get in their forward half, again, they tend to be fairly good, which is a shame because, as I said, like, of all the problems North Melbourne have, it's very rarely their forward line. And you can argue Paul Curtis has taken a while to get into the contest this year compared to other years, but their tolls are firing, their smalls, you know, provide a tiny bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just, again, North Melbourne, we talked about, a team like having a lot of ball and not doing much. It's just so, I don't know about frustrating, but it's just like,
It's just currently how their system is operating, and whilst you can kind of get away with it against teams, I guess like Port, like Essendon in this case. Although I think Port should have played a lot better during that game and just didn't. That we had that discussion last week. But it's not going to be a system that will hold up against teams that we know. Well, one, that we know are better than them, but two, that teams are even like only slightly above them, because they're normally they're a little bit more switched on defensively.
And it's like, and we talk about North Melbourne's midfield, and this sort of why, I think the most damning stat is, again, it was like a 10-point clearance win, and yet score from stoppages 2-4-16 to 2-3-15. Is just like, yeah, they win stoppages, and their midfield core is good at winning the ball and all that. But as I said, it normally results in like dinky handball chains, goes a bit up the ground, and then just goes nowhere. But in North Melbourne's defense, at least they can hold the ball, which is more than I can say about Essendon.
Yeah,
because they, again, they're not they're a hardish working team. Their tackling was fine. I do legitimately think that they, put in some decent contested efforts. Like, it was a much different display than last week, which is why they sort of caught up in the end. But man, they just, again, it's a bit different. It's like, at least North Melbourne is like, oh, they have a plan B. Like, they'll chip the ball back and they'll spend way too much doing it. But, at least it gives them, it takes a bit of pressure off some of their ball users. Whereas Essendon, so they were just like, some of their leaders' decision just to handball it to players that are either about to get tackled or have no chance of getting a decent disposal off. Really MSN's lazy at times. I will say Archie Roberts is the one I want to separate from this discussion, at least on this night. I think he did good at trying to generate. Darren Caldwell, I think we're just caught in the ground. Merritt was shut out until late, and Andy McGrath, he did some good things here and there, but it's just so hit or miss from him, considering he's a pretty uncontested player.
Yeah,
I don't
know. Essendon's system is just not it right now. I don't know if it's mostly a player thing, or if it's a system thing, or it's just both kind of culminating into garbage football. But it's not good, and we know that they're basically in a rebuild. That whether they admit it or not, that's up to them. But it's basically where they're sitting. But it's you would think that even with the pieces that they still have and some of the players that they still have that we know are really, really good, that they would perform better against some of these lower level teams.
Yeah, I think what I want to say that well in Kilda, because I don't like saying a passage is exactly how the night sort of went out, but I want to say it the Tristan Cherry goal after the blood wiping incident, where Tristan Cherry, obviously does the really dumb thing of wiping. Or was it? No, I think it was he gave away 50, because he got hit in the head. Umpire didn't see that. He pushes the player, gets really mad, and gives away a double 50. Essendon, with no pressure whatsoever, chooses to not go the full 100 meters, take a rush kick into their forward line, turn the ball over, And obviously on the hop, they can't really run defensively. The
Mhm.
ball goes to Tristan Cherry. He's just stayed there because, he's a bit cranky because he gave away 50-meter penalty. And Tristan Cherry kicks a goal. Like, there was no reason for Essendon not to take at least, like, I get trying to move the ball into your forward half, but like a shallow kick that gets intercepted and just goes the other way in a game where you're struggling is just like, it's sort of baffling. And it's just one of those things where, you wonder how they train composure at Essendon, because it's not coming from their leaders. It's definitely not coming from the kids. As I said, it's just, how, and like, like for as good as Merritt is, like he's fantastic with ball in hand. It's almost like, it's like when you're really good at something, you become like a worse teacher.
Yeah.
I think like the Merritt bailout thing where it's like, oh, Merritt can just like get us out of the bind and like get a good disposal.
No, he
And
can't.
like when that just doesn't happen.
Because the reality of it is he
Like I
does.
said, like this game he didn't. But like they freak out almost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Is they just don't use the ball.
Well, the reality of it is,
well.
and everyone kind of knows this, is like Merritt doesn't want to be here. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, yeah.
and
Well, to be fair,
it's not necessarily meant to say that all of his heart isn't in
Yeah.
it. Like, I'm sure he still is, loves and supports, like, his teammates. But like the fact of the matter is that like he did try to leave. He probably still wants to leave, but like there's only so much that one man could also really do.
Yeah, and as I said, like they try to get him like sort of a different role. He had O'Sullivan on him, who ACN. Geez, that was such a good game. Like that was I mean, I don't know who I'm giving Brownlow votes to game, but like to be on Merritt, keep him to 10-ish disposals. One pretty nice goal at the end, but otherwise didn't do that much. Pretty fantastic. But again, it's just like, yeah, like it's one of those things where like for a young midfield, I don't know. Like I said, I've almost been switching up forward. So it's like maybe Essendon. Obviously, they don't want to lose Merritt, but it would at least get them to shape their midfield a bit differently.
I still think,
and at least change how they think about their midfield
I still think
structure.
Essendon management were fools to not let him go and get all of those draft picks out of Hawthorn.
I don't
But
know.
it's
I think Essendon just like have so many problems. where it's
hindsight at
neither
this
here
point
nor
is
there.
2020.
Yeah. Like I said, like, for the culture, trying to take a stand versus, getting as much as you can out of it. I don't think those draft picks would have amounted to much. Like, Essendon would
No,
have
that would have been more towards of a
Um,
long-term plan than a short-term plan, really.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, do Essendon really need more young players, though?
It's more the fact that
Like, they've
do they
already
even have
got
a
a lot of-
long-term plan?
Well, that's the thing. But that's, like, less management. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's not exactly
Yeah,
something
but
that
they're older players.
Brad Scott could only
Yeah, they're older players.
like do as much
Yeah.
as what he's got in front of him, really.
Like, it's almost a Carlton problem. Like, they're relying on younger players, but, like, they still have a chunk of old guard that just, like, they're meant to be easing the transition, and sometimes they don't. Peter Wright was better, but, like, he's had definite games where he hasn't picked up. We've talked about Ben Mackay a lot. Again, Kyle Langford sort of heading towards the end of his career. I don't think he quite came back well from that injury in 2024. I think this will probably be his last year. So
Yeah.
again, as I said, we talk about, but Sam Durham, Jai Colwell are going to be the next leaders. Andy McGrath's going to be a next leader, and geez, I just don't have too much faith in them. Darcy Parish, same thing. It's going to be hard because they need to turf some people, but like, man, the leaders that they'll be left with are pretty shocking, which is upsetting.
Yeah, they don't have too much to really look forward to, do they, Bombers fans?
No, and the worst thing out of all this, North 2-1, don't have any confidence in them whatsoever.
No, that's
like if you see some of their stats, they are shocking. Yeah, like they North don't generate intercepts from oppositions. They don't get ground ball. They're stuck stat padding uncontested stats because if they have ball in hand, like if it's in dispute, they don't think they're going to win it, so they have to chip it around the back line. Again, this is why they have a lot of players just chipping and not winning because they really have to work it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like as I said, if they're not, getting the ball forward, like I said, if they get the ball to ground, they're probably going to lose. It's why they don't get that many inside 50s. Because they're still winning the ball. If it's a kick forward that goes to ground, they're probably going to lose it. If it's a handball that gets intercepted, you know what I mean? It goes to a stoppage contest, then they probably don't perform as well. So they've just got no structure. I've looked at their fixture. I think round 7 is the real test for North. And we want to see more contest wins, otherwise it's going to be ugly. But, as I said, they can keep getting cheap wins like this. It's not going to matter at the end of the day if they do lift.
Yeah.
There's just still a long way to go for them.
Yeah, they've definitely still got a fair way to go. But positive signs, they are on an upwards trajectory. So can't complain too much. 2 wins is better than no wins at this point.
Probably the 3 of the more out of form teams in the competition.
Yeah, but if you're North Melbourne, you take that right now because.
Yeah, no, you gotta.
All right, jumping over to the MRO, because thankfully there are no injuries out of this match, at least from what was reported. But Sam Darren was fined $1,500 for rough conduct against Harry Sheasel. And then Tristan Sherry with the blood wiping incident has been referred directly to the tribunal because that's just not on. It was a very, very stupid decision by him. Fair chance he will get minimum 3 weeks, I would say. Because
I think so.
One, because you're being referred to directly to the tribunal, but also it's unprecedented.
Yeah, it just needs to be strong enough to make sure, as I said, that's not you don't want to go too hard because again, the worst thing is you basically, this is one where you just don't want the kids, and technically it is a health liability. Again, I'm not saying Tristan Cherry has anything or whatever, but there have been instances where professional sports people have picked up blood-related diseases just from the nature of blood spilling.
Yep.
Happens a lot in, I think, skating, professional wrestling, if you want to call that a sport, or, UFC or, sports entertainment, flashy wrestling. As I said, you can get into a lot of trouble after that. So, don't mess around with blood.
No, don't. Well, as someone who is a regular plasma donor, I also donated today, fun fact. Don't mess with blood. It's...
Yeah, unless you're a professional. Then you can mess around with blood because you're probably giving it to people in
Yes, if you're a doctor or nurse, who's someone who actually works with blood, in a professional sense, then you can mess with blood. Otherwise, do not do that. This might be slightly off topic for the podcast, but even if you have some sort of blood kink, don't mess with blood. It's not healthy, not great.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. And Tristan Cherry is probably not going to be a doctor anytime soon.
No, even though, the Bulldogs have a player who was almost a doctor in Davidson, so they're close enough.
Oh, yeah. Well, when Winston was, very smart, he just was very dumb on the field. Oh. It's, sometimes you can get a bit of parody. Not parody. You can get two different style of players on.
Sometimes the player on field is very different to the person off field.
Yeah, but you don't want to be making those dumb decisions on field.
Correct.
And that was a dumb decision by Cherry, and he'll cop the band. He'll be rightfully given.
Yes. All right, let's jump over now to our Sunday games, and oh boy, what an interesting one this was. Over at the Adelaide Oval, Port Adelaide hosting the West Coast Eagles, and with a 2-point margin, the West Coast Eagles won out 13-14-92 to 13-12-90.
Yeah, and it's hard because, as I said, I'm going to slag off Port a little bit, but I think I am going to spend a fair bit of time, gassing up the Eagles, because this was seriously impressive. This is a new era Eagles and a new era Port, passing 2 strangers in the night. It's just going in seemingly very different directions. Even though this game was close, you can tell with the age profile and some of the composure that, West Coast did some really good things. In fact, we're going to be talking about it. If you took out first quarters, West Coast have had a fantastic start to the season. We need to make a Frankenstein team of Carlton and their first quarters, maybe first halves, and then a last half Eagles. And then you would just have the perfect football team, maybe. I don't know how it would work. But early on, Port dominated. they took advantage of the lack of tall defenders. Brady Hoff had an absolute nightmare first quarter, which just allowed Miss Georgiades to get early goals. Jack Whitlock got involved fairly early, and Jack Lukosius got a cheeky one, and it looked like they were just going to continue on there. The comeback sort of started with some very efficient ball use. Eagles were putrid in the first quarter, and they did a really good job of cleaning up while still, taking on some brave chains, and then just started a stoppage dominance that would absolutely embarrass the Port midfield. The shift from Shanahan to defence gave the early rattled defence some composure.
Mm-hmm.
His hands were terrific. He took some fantastic marks. Like, he didn't have as impressive stats-wise game, but like that game was equally as good as his Rising Star nomination game. And yeah, it shifted. Port started getting easier looks, as you like, to starting to burn their inside 50 dominance. And then the Eagles just, kept on going. And all of a sudden they had an 11-point lead in the third quarter. Port were able to get some back. West Coast missed some easier shots in the last, but they just hang on. And it wasn't really due to luck. And it wasn't even due to Port playing, terribly, terribly bad. They played better than they played North Melbourne. It's just the Eagles created more opportunities, created some more daring drives, able to get more better looks inside their 50, and around the ground just provided more at the contest.
Yeah, it's really weird to see the Eagles go from the team that we've seen over the past couple of years that just really, really struggled to find anything in the midst of their very, very early rebuild. To suddenly have two back-to-back solid performances against, whilst they're teams that aren't exactly in the greatest of forms right now, but are teams that we know can have a huge upside swing. Port Adelaide being one of those teams, and the fact that they matched up really well and were able to stay competitive the entire game, and win out even if it was a 2-point margin, is really impressive.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where I think, and as I said, I think there's a bit of a step back that needs to be happening, because Port put out a youngish list. They lost a few from injuries and whatever.
Yes.
But yeah, they weren't getting the most out of some of their other players. Some of them being older veterans that probably should know better by now. But you know what I mean? As I said, the Eagles just were very well rounded. They were led by from the few players. Liam Baker had an absolutely forgettable first quarter, and then really turned on the screws. Harley Reid was absolutely phenomenal. Tim Kelly had a really good inside midfield game. Willem Dersma absolutely spanked. I'm not sure if it was specifically on. I think it was on Jacob Ware.
Oh, yeah.
He's been pretty ordinary, to put it lightly. But you know what I mean? It's just there's so many players playing with confidence, and I think the biggest thing I noted, and it was so hard because I should say, and I didn't mention it last week, the commentary was pretty awful, and I'm not someone to bring more Kelly Underwood hate, but I think the decision to have Ken Hinkley is just commentating Port games is just woeful. It's press red for red, with bias, except that it's not meant to be. And especially for some people that, this was the only way they could watch this broadcast. And for 2 weeks in a row, they've just had weirdly Port-centric commentary. And I've actually listened to Hinkley with some of the work he's done with David Hoyne in the SEN talkback. He's got some good analysis, but when he's just waffling on about Port, he's definitely a bloke's bloke sort of thing. He's definitely just talking about the good old days and all that sort of thing. And it was it felt disrespectful, the amount they were just talking about the decent sides of Port when the Eagles were clearly coming back and started to have dominance. They were very late to react on that. They were acting as if Port had had a comfortable enough win from the first quarter. But, as I said, on the flip side, it was good that the Eagles, had that confidence where, as I said, they were like, oh, we stuffed up the first quarter, we made some errors, we can come back. And, as I said, and it wasn't just, players that were already been there, like Schoenberg, of all people, we talked about in the Adelaide player, didn't really play much, just a fringe player. He really came in, had a distinct role, and I think that's the big difference. Is last year he would have been asked to do 3 or 4 different roles. You know what I mean? It's oh, we need you to do this, this, and this. Whereas no, we've got players that can patch up whatever we need. So you can just come in. You're not a best 22 player, but we need you to come in and you can just do your stuff, and good things can happen. And yeah, as I said, they're 2-1. They get to play with house money for a while because they got more wins than last year, and I think they've probably got goodwill until probably halfway through the season when everyone's finished with their buys. Yeah, it's a really good outlook.
Yeah, obviously, small sample size at the moment. We're not exactly expecting the Eagles to, burst straight up the ladder as the season goes on. But, in this patch of momentum that they have, I hope they're able to carry it on even against some of the better opponents. Because they're in a position right now that whilst they're still young, still inexperienced, they will be missing Elliot Yeo again, unfortunately. But they've brought in all of these players, and both via the draft and obviously by, free agency and such, that have really started to develop into a really solid core of a team. And they finally at a point where they can actually win games. They're actually able to run and keep up and play 4 quarters and do the things that we were kind of expecting them to do much earlier than this.
Wow, when you say much earlier, we thought that they had this phase of oh, as I said, we're gonna lose a bit of our experience. Come 2020s, we'll do a little rebuild, get back on the park, keep some of our veterans. But obviously, that just didn't happen.
Correct.
A lot of their drafting was terrible.
A lot of the veterans had injuries.
Yeah, injuries or moved on to different clubs. So, as I said, they've basically had to do 2 rebuilds in one. And you can see the direction. And I think, obviously why you don't want to be forcing a fan base to go through this. And they're still not going to be perfect. As I said, poor Adelaide are probably optimistically, they're going to be one of the worst of the middle of the pack teams. I don't think they're quite the uber terrible of where we see, unfortunately, Richmond and Essendon at the moment. They'll be hanging around with North Melbourne. They'll be probably hanging around with Carlton. Carlton might actually be uber terrible. We don't know at the moment. But you know what I mean. So it's West Coast might just be hanging around the mediocre teams, and that's a good thing. And as I said, they did without Yo for the last half. So for people that were oh, well, they had Yo back. That sort
he
of
only played half the game.
No,
So
yeah, he only played half the game, and as I said, they had plenty of others pick up the mantle. Talking about the outlook for Port, because it's pretty grim. As I said, this loss wasn't that expected, but there's more pain to come because defensively that was shocking at time. Their back six is falling apart yet again due to injury. Sav was the big glue in terms of defensive structure for the first half of this match. He's had a lot better start of the season than Aaliyah has, and he might be gone for a while, depending on what we hear back from his injury. Port played with less experience on the park, although arguably with the Yo and Sava incidents, it's sort of evened out. So it's not doom and gloom, but it's a stark reality check. That's not going to be smooth sailing, and we're just going to have to find this next score because it's yeah, some of the younger players aren't doing well, but like a lot of the teams that are struggling with the rebuild, it's more the mid-level players that are coming in and out. Logan Evans has pretty much been very mediocre since probably since last year. Really, he started to drop off. Jacob Ware has had next to no impact in the team. Jackson Mead is sort of just a player. Lockie Jones goes very up and down. Joe Durn's actually done some all right things as a forward. Like, interesting how Hill and Joe Richards will fit in the description. So there's actually some decent forward line structure. It's just, yeah, as I said, for anything that sort of builds, it's like you're sort of reminded that other bits are also like decaying at Port. Like their midfield structure is absolutely appalling. Zach Butters is by far and away the most useful person with ball in hand. Anyone else is just like, again, like I was saying, like you don't really care if anyone else has a possession because they'll just like handball it into trouble or do whatever.
Yeah.
Willem Drew, I love him, but he just handballs into players that are in trouble. Horn Francis is at least more likely to kick it. His disposal, we all know it goes up and down. Is still a young player. Not too worried about that. And yeah, as I said, this week they just had too many younger players in that inside midfield mix with the loss of Bergman. But, as I said, they still shouldn't be like getting smashed in the stoppages from the Eagles. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, Porter like playing some young players, but like, you know what I mean? Is like that clearance difference shouldn't be as dramatic as it was.
No, I completely agree. Like Port, despite even though they do have some really high profile injuries at the moment, especially through that midfield, like I still have the talent on field to be able to do the things that we know that they can do, and they just don't half the time. To put it simply, they just don't, and I don't know if it's part of Josh Carr's new game plan. We know he probably wants to head towards a rebuild right now anyway. The reality of it is that's probably.
Oh, he said no. He said it was he said no, we're not going to talk about rebuilding where I don't know. I mean, you might as well have been saying rebranding. I forgot what he said. It's going to be a transition period. Which I know might be true.
It's basically a soft rebuild. Like
yeah,
you've got good parts, but your key players are getting injured too often at the moment. Stav and Aliralier kind of being the big two in your defense.
But like if you're a list management, like part of you've got to believe that Butters is going to go. Like I'm not saying that he will or won't. I hope he signs, but like chances are he goes at the end of the year. But like it's in your best interest to find more evenness in this midfield group, and they just don't. And it's a very dangerous. Like, I think they're at very dangerous levels of, like, going towards Essendon levels of just, like, oh, these players, they're hard bodies, they do some defensive runnings, but, like, it doesn't really mean all that much if whenever they win the ball, whether it's from tackling pressure or whatever, they just turn the ball over.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know, Porter in like a very weird situation right now.
Yeah. Positives. Josh Lyle was good.
Yeah, that's a good.
I liked him on debut.
We love a good debut.
Will Brody was good when he was on the park. I was like, he's going in and out of the contest, and then I looked and it was just 40%, 2% time on ground. Again, it was very interesting because it was like, I just assumed they played Brody because they were like gonna, slowly introduce Wines. Hasn't had the biggest off season, so like, obviously suspended, but a few injuries like so it's like just working back into the side, let him go Sandful, but then like Brody only plays half the game and we needed a contested ball winner, so I don't really know how that works. It was just interesting to say the least.
I have one question, and it's semi-related to this game but also not related to, it's more also related to the game we just talked about. Is I want to know what the Dersma household is like right now. Because you just had a face-off against with Xavier and Zane, with Zane winning, and Willem won. So, like, what teams are they currently supporting?
I don't know, but I reckon Yasmin's got some itch to get on the footy field because it's a good name to have, the Dersma last name. So yeah, as I said, like I mean, look, obviously they knew, like, it was saying for weeks, like, ever since Xavier went into the system, it was always like, oh yeah, my brothers are probably like way more talented than me. Yeah. And to be fair, I think he said sister as well. Yeah, as I said, we're starting to see that now where Willem's just really got into it. Zane, after taking 1.5 years to develop, is starting to look pretty solid as sort of an outside forward line player. So, yeah, no, it's pretty terrific.
It's definitely a very interesting household, I think.
Yeah,
I can only imagine how much more chaotic it is when the AFLW is like starts later in the season, and then it's
yeah,
all four siblings playing basically at once.
yeah. I'm talking about like players from like a last draft that just took it. Like it's also promising signs to see Bo Allen start to
Yes,
take shape. He's on the outside, is a bit tall, he can get involved forward, and as I said, he was just so outside of the contest. It was almost like the problem that Campbell Chesser had, uh, where it was just like he needed to be fed a bit more, but so they just didn't have any outside movement. But now that the Eagles are starting to transition a bit more, we are actually starting to see Bo Allen become a bit more threatening as well, which is really good.
it is really good. All right. I think we've wrapped up this game pretty well. So let's jump over
Mm-hmm.
to our last game of the round. And what an absolute insane game this was, especially in that last quarter. Oh my god, I can still
Mm.
picture fucking. Sorry, apologize for the swearing. That was accidental.
Flippin',
But
flippin'.
Cozzy Pickett,
Uh,
what a man. That's all I'm
yeah.
gonna say. At the MCG,
I told you, like,
like
oh,
crazy.
he is one of the most damaging stoppage players. It's
He's
just like for so much of his
he's just
career,
a
we've just had to think of him as a forward.
he's just a freak.
But no, he is.
He's just a
Yeah,
freak.
he is a really exciting midfielder that can again go into the forward line and finish off sometimes. Which again, Mum need to. And that's why I told you before. It's like why Latrell, like even like he might take a while to get going. Like the ability to just have Kasaya be in centre bounces is a huge boost.
It is.
Um,
But yes, before we continue on and talk about the highs and lows of this game, Carlton was hosting the Demons, and with a 23-point margin, Melbourne win out, especially with an absolute fantastic final quarter, 15-10, 100 to an 11-11, 77.
Yeah, and to put this last quarter, it was 2 goals for Carlton to 8 goals 2 for Melbourne, and Carlton had a 20-point lead at the 9 minute and 44 mark of the fourth quarter, and they absolutely rolled over to get their bellies tickled. I mean, look, as I said, I'm going to say some of the reasons why I think that this does happen and it like happens so consistently, but yeah, it's just hard because like this is embarrassing. Like I thought, and like it makes me sort of happy because I was like, oh, Port's like going to be the most embarrassing team this week. Like you sort of hate it when it's your team. Like no one had like that much expectations of North and Essendon. Like it was a bad game, but I don't think that's like embarrassing. That's just telling you what you already know. Um, and then yeah, it's like Port. You feel like they should have won that game. They didn't. Pretty embarrassing. And then Carlton just absolutely crapped the bed. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. That takes a bit of heat off us. Yeah. Um, as I said, Carlton are just so weird.
I
Like,
I have a way to
like,
kind of describe this. I can't remember where I
yeah.
saw it. I think I saw it on like Twitter/X earlier today. But it's
Mm,
basically like for the first half of a game, Carlton are playing to win. Like, and you saw it in this game. They were actually really, really good in this first half.
yeah.
But in the second half, it's
Oh, it was.
almost like they were just playing not to lose. Like they were just rather like
Yeah.
trying to hold on rather than continuing to kind of play that aggressive play style that they had in the first half.
I actually sort of like thinking of the other way where I just think that teams don't care about like forward half performances against Carlton because the way that they play where like we know Carlton, like they're technically a grit and grind team. You know what I mean? Like they perform really well in the stoppages. They don't tackle well, but they'll like move the ball from forward stoppages to the outside, fairly well. And their defense, holds up reasonably well. Again, they allow a lot of entries, but they work decent from like back half sort of play. But because they're only really getting their score from stoppages, because their transition's like pretty awful. I just think that's just like hard to maintain. Because eventually, you know what I mean? Like, because again, like their middle group isn't defensive and they're going to get tired, and eventually just like avenues to goal open up. So it's like, they like defend from stoppages for the first half of games. Then they get tired. Their midfield units, like, they're not fast. Like, they don't actually have that much pace. Like, Jagger Smith is starting to eject a bit. They'll be looking at the Camparelli boys coming up. But, like, they're slow. So, you know what I mean? I just think, like, this is just, like, just how Carlton are. Like, that's a bit of their DNA. And they just haven't worked out how to particularly control the ball, you know, or anything like that, to where, as I said, you just wait. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, Carlton will make the ball, like, will make movement hard up to a certain point, and then it's really easy, you know? And it just adds, like, a flood of goals. So, yeah, as I said, you will give credit, like, Carlton's back six. Like, they were really impressive in the first half. Lost the inside 50 for a bit by account, but still had a massive lead. Like, Melbourne only had the one goal. You know what I mean? It just, like, again, you can't say it didn't account for much, but, like, their style's just, like, it's obviously unsustainable.
Yeah, and you can kind of
Like,
tell
this is proof at this
with like Melbourne's inside 50 count steadily increasing over Carlton's that there was going to be a big swing to this game at some point. But no one really knew when in the game it was going to come, because again, Carlton's back six was still holding up really well. Like, they were stopping Max Gawn from having a defensive impact, like a lot as well. So like, he couldn't even get in and do the things that he's able to do at both ends, as well as obviously as a ruck. Like, which is a huge credit to Wiedering and to I'm forgetting names right now. But like, especially to Jacob Wiedering, like, he is such a core pillar of that defense.
Harry Dean's been pretty reasonable.
That
I
is
would say.
that is one thing I
coming
noticed,
into
is
the
that
side.
when Harry Dean went off with his injury, is when the cracks started to kind of appear a little bit more obviously, in terms of like
And look, like,
Melbourne's
it
offense.
makes sense because, you know, it's like, oh, what else have got there? Oh, Lewis Young, like Mitch McGovern's playing forward this game, did a pretty decent job. 3 goals too. I must admit, I actually switched off at some of Carlton's good pit because I was just like, oh, I don't need to see a thrashing. Like, I've had enough football after watching Port lose.
It's
turned it on for the last quarter.
just to swing back on a comment you made earlier about Essendon and like them relying on their young players. When you were talking about that, I immediately thought of Harry Dean for this game, just purely for the fact that when he went off, like, it made such a difference.
Well, their older players, like, did jack, really. Like, when you look at the output, like, you know, like, Ollie Holland's absolutely fantastic. Elijah's been great. Ollie Florin is still technically young. You know, and Jagger Smith is really building on, you know, it's just like, you know, who was struggling. It's like, well, you know, pretty much Hewitt was pretty ordinary after the first half. You know, Cripps was sort of, yeah, like, his output has really gone down in the last few years. Obviously still don't have here's the one that's actually going to come back. It's not Chera. Walsh.
Walsh. No, didn't Walsh play this week?
You know, oh, he did actually. No, I'm thinking of Chera.
You would be thinking of Chera, because Chera is always injured.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so is Zach Williams, you know, who is also injured in this game.
Yeah, but, like, you know, like, Zach Williams tries. It's just, yeah. But, like, yeah, so, like, yeah, I mean, you know, it's not that surprising, like, Carlton have bad transition. When you look at the players, like Matt Carroll, Lockie Cowan, obviously Ollie Hollands is, like, the one shining light in that. But even he had a very quiet first half. You know, they have no experience in transition. They have no one on the wing that they really can reliably go to. So, as I said, they just can't protect the back half. And, you know, as I said, once stoppages start going their way, as I said, it's floodgates open. And it will continue to be that for a tiny while. So it's just like, how do you retool your midfield to be more consistently accountable? Because again, like, you can dominate however you want for the first half, but like it's clearly not going to win you games of football when teams can just like rack on a huge amount of confidence in the second half, knowing that scoring is just going to be so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now is a good point to, whilst we're on the topic of stoppages, like talk about Melbourne's midfield because moved on Clayton Oliver,
Oh,
moved on Petrarca. Viney didn't play this game. Trent Rivers didn't play this
hmm.
game, and yet they looked incredible. Or when they actually were switched on.
Yeah. And again, Steele, like, again, come from a midfield that, like, didn't technically perform all that well, and, he was asked to play a few roles last year, didn't quite take to it. You say, okay, Steele, I need you to be a really good defensive pressure role. And he absolutely dominated. 16 tackles, double the best amount for Carlton, who was Cripps, who was fine tackling wise. Like, that wasn't a problem for him. He had 8, that was good. But you know what I mean? Like, it was an insane amount of pressure. Then we had Sparrow leading the ground ball gets for the day and Pickett leading the score involvements for the day with 10. So, like, each one, like, specifically added, to it. I will say, like, Sparrow is starting to get some momentum too. So, like, as I said, it will make King very pleased because it wasn't just their inside midfield. Their outside chipped in with a few important moment goals. I'm talking about Harvey Langford was really, really good. Kate Chandler also came in a few moments. He was like sort of playing half forward. And yeah, I said it just added because, yeah, as I said, Bailey Fritsch was a good pillar, but like Myercheck had a fairly bad game and so did Van Rooyen. So, like it wasn't all going for Melbourne's offense. Again, Carlton defends all pretty well. As I said, it's just like when the opportunity was there, Melbourne weren't messing around. Like they were clinical. And I think we've got to give them some respect because again, like, you know, like Richmond like gave up a bit of lead, but like it was still not as dominant as this display. Sydney obviously did it in like that really big clump, but they probably have a lot more talent than this Melbourne outfit. And yet Melbourne were just able to look as powerful as them in that like one quarter. Was
Yeah,
really good.
yeah, it is really good, and like the fact that like this wasn't like a win like this, especially in a double milestone game for both Gorn and Tom
Mm,
McDonald's 250ths. Like there's
yeah.
nothing better than that, especially when it's against a rival club too. Like just the amount, I guess, of like energy and of emotion that would have been in that final quarter, like that can just take the whole game to another level. Like it's not just about winning at that point; it's about making making a statement as a club. And I think that they did that really well to say that like we moved on 2 of our best midfielders to better
Yeah.
clubs. And by all standards, they're doing fantastic at their new clubs. We
Yeah.
didn't play one of our best pressure veterans in Jack Viney. We didn't play one of our better up and coming players in Trent Rivers, and we still.
Probably not up and coming, just
He
more.
is an older player, but like
The next most experienced in a bounce player would
yeah,
be Trent Rivers in that side, and they just chose not to play him,
and they still
which is bold.
yeah, it is a bit bold. It is a bit of a bold statement. But they still managed to work their way into this game, to grind away at Carlton's defense, and then to just completely knock them out of the park when all is said and done. It makes a
Yeah,
statement
and look, I'm
on
not going to rag
like for
on.
the coaching staff
Yeah,
that that Stephen King is already doing a fairly decent job. But it's also making a statement for the players that like they're not done yet. They still very much want to chase this this last opportunity for a premiership before players like Max Gawn, Tom McDonald start looking at like Jack Viney start looking at retirement. Jake Lever.
yeah. And like I said, we see sort of the balance. Like we've seen Ed Langdon, who was arguably like pretty quiet last year. Still have important touches. Harrison Petty, Tom McDonald, as you say, Max Gawn. Like, they've still got enough core. As I said, it's just that they've been a lot. They've just needed a bit of refresh in talent. And as I said, like, as much doom and gloom came with, like, changing out that midfield, I think it was what Melbourne needed at the time. And I think, it just goes to show with, you can't just say good coaching, but, like, coaching with belief where players, as I said, because again, like, even the Fremantle game where they got blown out is like, I still believe, like, some of their chains were the right ideas. They just had a problem with execution. They go back to the scoreboard. They don't let, that bring them down too much. And then, as I said, like, I bet like the Eagles, you get caught on the back foot. You're like, you know what? We might not be like the most perfect team ever, but we know that our best bits of movement are going to score goals. And that's what they did. And it's a much different Melbourne to last year, who really were like doing they were a lot more consistent, but they just didn't score goals at all. Like, they were a sinkhole in the forward line.
Yeah, that's right. And, that kind of leads into Carlton. Like, whilst they're a really, really good team with ball in hand, like, what they do with it after that is like, it's like a coin flip.
Yeah, well, as I said, I made a bit of notes, but I'm probably not going to, like, specifically go into it because I feel like it's typical Carlton bashing. But, like, as I said, like, they just don't do much of the ball. Like, they have pretty even possession counts, and yet they just don't get the ball inside 50. They struggle to do it consistently. They, as I said before, they have to do it through stoppages, which is a very inefficient way to doing it. They would rather just, like, most teams would rather just move the ball from, like, maybe not like pure chip mark, but, have some different looks and avenues. But if you're just kicking it long to a contest every time, like, it just staggers it. And as I said, it's a draining way to play football. It requires you bringing the game into ground level contested style. And as I said, when teams find a way to break through it, it's fairly easy. So again, they need to really, really restructure.
Yeah. But I don't know.
Not good.
I don't know if that's going to happen this year at this rate. Who knows?
Nah, not really.
All right. If there isn't all that much to really talk about, I will jump over now to the injuries. We've already kind of touched on two of them. Zach Williams out with a rib injury from a nasty collision. I don't think it is actually, like, the injury itself is actually that bad, but the impact kind of was. So hopefully he won't miss too much footy. Then obviously Harry Dean, probably the big out that made the biggest swing later in the game. He's out with a hip injury or hip/side. So I don't know how long term that will be. Hopefully not that long, maybe a couple of weeks. If he's lucky. If not, it might be a little bit longer. I don't know the severity of it as of yet. And then CJ Chalkagiath is out with a calf injury for the Demons, so he'll be missing a couple of weeks as well. But otherwise, like, Melbourne, yeah, they're even the defense, like, as the game kind of went on, like, started looking really, really solid, despite, like, the fact that there's not as much experience in that backline anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe, like, not as much experience. Like, they've done a good job of, like, integrating. Like, Blake Harris has been pretty solid. Who, sometimes was a liability. As I said, they've still got, like, that Lever McDonald core. As I said, they do have Disco Turner to add back into the mix when he comes back. So yeah, no, as I said, like I said, they're definitely not like that defensive powerhouse they once were. They won't go back to it. But I think it's about stopping huge runs like they did at times last year. So yeah.
All right. So just before we jump over to the fixture, the MRO reports for Sunday's games have just come in, and Zach Butters has officially jumped Toby Green's fines payment record. He was fined $1,000 for engaging in a melee/wrestle in the third quarter. That jumps his fine total to over $50,000 across his 142 games. Whilst Toby Greens is currently sitting at 48,850 across 265 games. So he's officially the most fined player in the AFL.
Yeah. Also, Devin Robertson got week's
Yes, he
ban
did get a
for
1 week
the
ban for
sling
rough
tackle on
conduct
Butters.
against Butters. Also in the third quarter, that's probably what resulted in the melee. I'll be honest with you. I can't remember the entire thing, but it makes a bit
Uh,
of sense to me.
I mean, they're on the third quarter. Yeah,
Yes.
they're on the third
And
quarter.
then Liam Baker was also fined $1,000 for engaging in said melee. Also, not surprising, he is quite hot-headed.
Yeah, not
Um,
quite heavyweight in terms of the fine, but loves a good little niggle.
he does. And then over for the Carlton versus Melbourne game, Latrell Pickett was fined $1,000 for contact with an umpire. He's new to the
Mm,
AFL level. It's okay. He can get away with it at least once.
yeah, not quite as smooth stepping as his cousin.
But there has not been an update on the Rising Star as of yet. If it does come through, as we're talking about the fixture, I will mention it. But let's jump over now to the fixture. Starting with the Thursday night
Yeah,
clash, Easter Thursday. Not that Easter Thursday is really a thing, but it's Easter week. It's fine. Over at the Gabba with the Brisbane
yeah,
Lions hosting Collingwood.
yeah. It's gonna be tough for the Lions. As I said, I think Collingwood. Like again, we don't normally say they have forward dominance, but like with the outset Brisbane have, uh, yeah, it's going to be tough for them to not let players like McStay and Memory take over this game. Not that I think they'll kick a bag, but like Collingwood only just need them to kick enough. Collingwood on the outside pretty good. Brisbane also turning the ball over a bit, and Collingwood just tend to again rebound off halfback. I think this is a fairly, I would quietly, confidently say Collingwood for this one.
Interesting. I don't really know where I'm leaning for this one, I'll be honest, because I'm thinking about Brisbane's backline mostly and how that currently matches up with their outs to Collingwood's front line, forward line. Sorry. It's
Yeah,
it's not exactly a 1-to-1 because like Collingwood, their forward line is like very hit or miss right now. And but Brisbane's outs with them being like three major defenders, I think it could end up, swinging in Collingwood's favor because like they're not going to get Harris Andrews back just yet. I think he's still got 1 week at least,
mm-hmm.
so that could make like a bigger impact than what people might expect. So I think Collingwood could definitely have an upper hand in terms of that battle. Midfields, I think they're probably about on par realistically. Um, at least purely because of the fact that like Brisbane aren't exactly in playing at 100% right now. Like again, they're still
Yeah,
missing McCluggage. I don't know for how much longer, but like Rayner's had a really solid game last week. Um, so there's at least one bright spot. I'm blanking on everyone else's performances right now, but like I know Rayner had a really solid game. So that could
yeah.
be
O'Neill had a good first week and then went really quiet since. So
yeah. So it's like it's probably about on par. So yeah, I think Collingwood could very much swing that one. It'll be really interesting to see what the team sheets look like when they come out. Jumping over to Friday's game, the traditional Good Friday clash. This one is always raising money for the Good Friday appeal as well. But it's
mm.
North Melbourne and Carlton at Marvel.
Well, at least like these teams have gotten better in the forward half. So the kids might get something. Yeah. I hope the Steve Larkey of joy and giving presents to kids continues because yeah, I think he'll enjoy the slightly battered Carlton defense. I know he'll be on Wiedering, but I think Wiedering will have his hands full, especially if Harry Dean does not make this contest because yeah, Carlton just don't have any defensive coverage. Um, as for this game, as I said, yeah, they're two teams that are fairly impotent, really, in certain ways, but they're very different. Um, I think North Melbourne will be able to like win enough contest out of the ball
Mm-hmm.
um, to put on score and I don't think Carlton will put up too much of a challenge, but like I don't know. It's hard because like North Melbourne haven't really like proved much. Um, yeah, as I said, it's just like North probably should use this chance to continue their winning streak. North on the outside might actually be better than Carlton on the outside. I'll give them that.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
not that it's like with a lot of confidence, but I'm leaning towards North in this contest purely because I like what I've seen from North more at this point in time. Um, but also I just don't really trust Carlton like at all. The same reason why I don't trust in Kilda. Like they've just not shown me much.
yeah, I mean, it's a pretty low, but Saints have shown more than, like, Carlton, Essendon, and Richmond North. Carlton, Essendon, and Richmond North are, like, the four really bad teams at the moment. Like, don't get me wrong, like, Port have been bad, but at least they've, like, had some sort of, like, statistical O'Shea showings. West Coast have improved. St Kilda have had some pretty good contests. Sans probably the last game. But yeah, as I said, yeah, but like of all the bad ones, like I think North probably have a bit more going for them in terms of like their list and what they can seemingly achieve now.
Yeah, now that
Yeah,
they've
as
got
I
a little
said,
bit
Carlton are
more
just sort
like
of that.
confidence, I think they can definitely take it to these teams that are like are sitting either around the same area as they are or slightly above them. I think they can make those tougher contests, and at least make it more
Yeah.
entertaining of a game, even if they don't, even if they don't win it.
But on the flip side, it's like, there's Carlton players that are doing fairly well. Like their young brigade, as I said, they might look at this and be like, okay, like we're up against a midfield that theoretically isn't too far out of our age bracket. Arguably we can, do a lot more damage with the ball. We know our scoring chains can be quite good. So, they'll still try and, I don't know about Aunt Muscle, but get it. But again, it's just so hard because again, like these two teams don't necessarily tend to have too much of they don't get too many inside 50s from their possessions. Let's put it this way. So it's like, is this just going to be like some sort of weird nil old draw, or like, is it what I think's going to happen is that North are just going to win a bit too many of their contests, get in their forward line, and they'll just like expose a battered Carlton defense.
It'll be very interesting to see what happens there. But let's jump over now to the Adelaide Oval, where the Crows will host the Dockers, and this could be an absolute barn burner.
Yeah, because the Crows probably, fairly unlucky to be 1-2. Played 3 pretty good games. Obviously beaten by I can't remember who they got beaten by, but it wasn't by much. Western Bulldogs and Geelong. But
Yes.
as I said, over the last few years, Freo have had a decent record against it. Freo finally have to travel to Adelaide Oval for the first time in a little bit, or at least to face the Crows, I should say. And yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Obviously, I think the battle of the back six versus Adelaide's forward six is going to be pretty solid. Fremantle can sort of nullify a bit, and I think they'll get the game on. I think Adelaide won't be like scoring crazy amounts, but it really depends on how efficient Fremantle are going to be. Because as I said, we know that Adelaide like to rebound off sloppy entries, and Freo have been good, but there's been times where they've allowed teams to rebound. Like we saw in that last half against Geelong. We saw it against Richmond when they were struggling with those forward entries. So I think it's up to their forward six to make the most of their entries. I think they're naturally going to get the ball in there more. And I've got an inkling that Freo, I don't know, maybe I'll tip Adelaide. I'm unsure at this point. But yeah, it should be
I want to tip Freo. Honestly, I kind of want to tip Freo on this one, but I know that like this is very much a 50-50 game, and I kind of want to wait for the team sheets. I think for this one the most, because out of all the games that we've got this week, it's probably the closest one.
Yeah. The
apart from probably the traditional
Good
Monday
Friday
clash as well.
Yeah, that should be a really exciting game. But yeah, so we'll get to that. But yeah, as I said, this one is just like, again, yeah, it's also like a very interesting outside battle. Like Adelaide are really good on the outside, but we've seen Seri obviously not as good as his first week, but tough conditions, hard to get a really good outside game. But like he was still adding a bit. They can bring a Driscoll back if they want. So there's a lot, Fremantle can do. And again, it's the big challenge of McAndrews against probably the scariest ruck duo to go up against. Like, it's hard to both combat the athleticism of Jackson and the big tall dominance of Sean Darcy.
Yes.
Even if Darcy isn't technically as useful anymore.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge test for McAndrews. But, from what we've seen so far, I mean, he's up for the challenge. So it'll be really good to see how that ends out. All right, jumping over to our Saturday games now, and there is only 2 of them on Saturday this week. First one being at the MCG, Richmond versus Port Adelaide. Honestly, I'm not expecting much from this game. I don't think either of us are. I just want to see a competitive game. Whether we win, whether we don't, that's fine. I just want it to be a lot more competitive than last week.
Yeah, I think the problem with Richmond is like, again, we've seen when Port have ball in hand and not that pressured, they are fantastic. Like we saw when the Eagles started to clamp on the pressure, it started to fall apart. But like, again, like there's such a big gap between plan A to plan C for Port Adelaide. Whereas Richmond's plan A is very much a grind. Like they struggle to get going. Their best option is to get both teams playing at a plan C, which is possible, but it's not going to make for a good game of football.
Correct.
There is a chance that Port Adelaide romp away with this, but it's going to be a lot harder for them, as I said, just because, again, due to the fact that they're both fairly young teams, there should be at least a bit of an arm wrestle. But again, I think Richmond are just going to take they're going to take a few players coming back before I see them getting their first win of the season.
Yeah, I agree. Because we're still going to be missing Tom Lynch, so that's not helpful. Still going to be missing Dan Curvis, so that's not helpful. They're kind of like the 2 bigger pillars that we desperately need to try and fill. I don't think we're going to have Jonty Fall either this week. So again, that's another tall that's not in there. So it's I don't know exactly what our plan is going to be to come up against Port again. You're likely going to be playing Vicentini as your ruck, who's been looking pretty solid. I don't know what your defense is going to look like with Rats out, but you'll have Alir, who's
our defense is going to be shocking.
Oh yeah.
Like we're going to be really
Alir and BZT doing most of the work, I would assume.
Yeah, we either bring back BZT or maybe Marshall comes back. I think we should play BZT. It's not like Richmond are that particularly fast. Like they have a few lumbering tolls that BZT can sort of match up better against. But yeah,
the one matchup I think will be really interesting is our back 6 against your front 6. That part I think might be a little bit more of an interesting matchup.
Yeah, because I said like Mitch Georgiades is just like so hard to defend against. But you get lost and you have the option of bringing Broad back this week, isn't he? Back on the park?
Yes, I believe Broad is meant to be back this week. But again, we've got Loston in there now. We've got Miller, Gibcus. Like we've got some like really solid defenders who've like shaped really well. Granted, Gibcus is still somewhat coming back from his injury, even though he has had a good run at it as of late. But yeah, like that, I think that whole like back 6 to front 6 matchup is going to be the most interesting part of this game.
Yeah. And that's going to be Richmond's game plan. I think they're going to have to try and force the worst entries out of Port because, again, likely Port's going to get some inside 50 dominance. It's just the way these 2 teams play. But Port aren't clinical. They seemingly doing better in their forward line. But yeah, as I said, I just can't see Richmond get enough of the ball in their forward line. They might score a bit more, though. I think that's their biggest aim.
I think so. It'd be nice. But yeah. All right. Let's jump over now to a game over in the West, over at Optus, with the West Coast Eagles hosting the Sydney Swans. Swans obviously coming back from a bye. So they'll be probably a little bit stronger with the Eagles. I don't know if their 2-game momentum will carry over very well into this game because Swans are just a far better team all round. But I hope that what they've learned over the past 2 weeks is that they can actually make this game competitive and interesting.
Honestly, like I said, like the Eagles sans one game, they've had a pretty horrendous run at Sydney. I still remember that 205-34
Oh,
scoreline from a few
yeah,
years ago.
I remember that too.
That was yeah, but they've come a long way since then. Sorry to bring that up. But yeah, as I said, probably just because Port lost to them, I mentioned that. But yeah, look, I'm gonna say like the West Coast Eagles, like if you are gonna like pick something about Sydney, is that their back six isn't that like they aren't that one-on-one that great.
Agreed.
So like if I was Eagles forward line, I'm just like, you know what? We've won the ball not perfectly, but enough the last few games. If we can just like make enough, we can make a contest of it. And you know, like, yeah, Sydney are probably going to like transition the ball really well. West Coast haven't really stopped transition all that much. They've defended okay once it has gone in. But yeah, as I said, they still don't quite have that overall ground presence. And yeah, as I said, they'll be missing Yo. But oh yeah, as I said, the important thing for the Eagles is making sure early to make sure Kurno doesn't get off the chain, because I think that's one of the things that they've done a bit poorly early is like their initial defensive matchups. And then, yeah, so making sure they get enough of the ball going forward, and then they get a chance. Again, it's all about making life difficult for the Swans, because I don't think I'll be tipping the Eagles, but, you know, as I said, never say never, because, again, they're playing with house money at this point. And, yeah, as I said, we'll have a serious discussion about the change of views of West Coast if they manage this win.
Well,
but I don't think it's going to happen.
I'm just taking a look at the injury list at the moment for the Eagles, and if all is okay with Harry Edwards, he should be back this week.
Yeah, and that would make a nice Kerno matchup. Again, I think Harry Edwards is one of those ones where, like, sometimes you might tack on an extra week just because he is so fragile. But yeah, as I said, theoretically he should be back and okay.
It is a good thing we're on the West Coast game for the fixture, because the Rising Star has also just come out. And you want to take a guess at who it was? Clue being a West Coast player?
Desma?
Yeah, it was Desma.
Yeah.
Like, he had a phenomenal outing. So in total,
there'll be a few more Eagles by the end of the year.
20 disposals, 6 marks, 4 clearances, and kicked 1-3.
Yeah. Should have been more accurate, probably. He missed one bad one, but yeah, as I said, I'll forgive him for that. He does like a good flying shot, and he needs to get a bit better on that radar, but like once he does, he's going to be a dangerous kick from slightly outside 50.
Absolutely. He's got like the he's going to have the Jaden Short kind of kick where he can just kick it long from outside 50.
Yeah. As I said, it's like, yeah, you're just going to have to be so much more defensively responsible on the wing. And that's where I think that Ware sort of fell short, where he just sort of went off the chain. Got a bit too much time and a bit too much space, didn't get enough respect, really. So, yeah. Sydney, they're more likely to respect him. He might struggle a bit more this game, but again, only because I respect some of Sydney's outside defensive efforts. But again, like, yeah, sure, you mitigate that, but yeah, if the Eagles have a bit of confidence, know that they can get a bit in their forward line, they should still have some avenues.
Yeah, I'm definitely leaning Sydney just in terms of tipping. I think it's a safer option, at least for this one. But I really hope the Eagles surprise them. I really hope the Eagles make this game interesting. And honestly, I would not be opposed to
I still think it's like 80% Sydney. I still think it's 80% Sydney, but like before this season, it would have been like 95.
Yeah.
Like that would have been my guess on the odds before coming into this.
Now we have a little bit more of an idea of like the direction that West Coast is heading in. We can give them a little bit more respect in terms of percentages against certain clubs.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's jump over now.
Shall we head over to the MCG?
Yes, over to our huge amount. Actually, I say huge amount. It's only 2 games of our Sunday games. With the Demons hosting the Gold Coast Suns. Suns obviously also coming back from a break. They are pretty much I don't think they're going to get anyone back in terms of injury. I don't think they're really missing anyone except Ballard.
Well, I said apart from the obvious in Petrarca.
Yes, apart from Track.
Rao might come back.
Yeah, I think Rao is on track to come back. If not, he might miss only one more week. Track will obviously still miss a couple. which is really sad because
And Humphrey's still
this would have been
suspended.
a fun game for track to play in.
Oh yeah. But yeah, as I said, it's going to be hard because it's a good light test. Because obviously, like, yeah, if Rao doesn't come back, like, it's a slightly light midfield, and like, I think that's where Melbourne, can sort of take what they did against Carlton, try and get a few more contests. But again, it's just going to be streaky because again, like, if Melbourne start off slow like they did against Carlton, like the Suns are probably going to like stamp a bit more authority than Carlton did. Like, there's less avenues of coming back. That being said, like, Melbourne, good mix of inside outside, forward line starting to function a bit. Like the Suns aren't the best outside team, and they do have some a lot of their generations from the middle. So again, it's about being enough, but yeah, as I said, it's about running with the Suns, and unless Melbourne just like really find a way to bring this game to an absolute scrap, the Suns are probably just going to get a fair bit of separation. Like Melbourne, they are scoring well, but if they try and outgun the Suns, they're going to get burnt. Pardon the pun.
I mean, I don't know if that. I feel like that pun is definitely on purpose, knowing you. But yeah, the Suns are just they're just a better team, to put it simply. And even though they just had a week off and we've seen less of them this year, like we know that they are capable of just running away with a big margin against teams that let them have so much space to roam. And the fact that like even if they're going to be down, they're two of their key midfielders, I don't think it's going to bother them all that much at all.
Yeah, I don't know. Like if I would say like Suns are like by far and away, like I wouldn't give like a team like a Melbourne like any chance. But like as I said,
I mean,
just
it's not like a firm 100%, but it's like a fairly high percentage.
No, I don't know. I'd say like 75, maybe. I don't know. It is at the G.
True, it
and
is.
Melbourne have only had one bad game, so I got to give them a bit of credit. But yeah, so the Suns have had no bad games, which is in football terms good.
True.
So yeah, you're gonna tip them every day.
And I mean, it is early season, but they are first in the ladder right now for a reason.
Yeah. As I said, like even like if you want to say, oh, they've had easy fixtures, like they still flogged Geelong, which took a bit of doing.
Yes.
Not that Geelong played particularly well that match, but like it's still the audacity to just pounce them was really good. So,
yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. One team who I won't give much of a chance is the other Melbourne-based game.
Yes.
We're going to Western Bulldogs and Essendon, and this could possibly be the worst matchup that Essendon...
Are we expecting a repeat of last year where Bailey Dale gets 40 plus and they just annihilate the Bombers by 100 points?
Technically, it was 93.
You know what I
But yeah, 2 games last year, 93 and 91 point margins. Bulldogs absolutely trounced from the centre square. They've gone a bit more even in defence. Not that matters. I think Essendon will only get junk time goals, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to see much optimism for the Dons in this game. There's not really.
There's not much to say. No, there is really not much to say. Yeah, I hope someone at Essendon has a good game. I'm not going to name who. I just hope someone does. But the reality of it is that the Bulldogs will just absolutely run away with it. Make this a high percentage game.
I think there's small wins you can get. Like if you keep Norton or Darcy quiet, like that's pretty good. Maybe if you stop Dale having like halfback run and dash, or if you make the most of your 40, like if Essendon's like, and it's hard because like it can't all be in junk time, but if they're like in it with like a 9-4 score line, you know what I mean? Whereas like, yeah, you just expect the Bulldogs to get a massive amount of entries, but like, yes, and make the most of it. That will be good. But yeah, as I said, like from what's presented so far, the chasm between these two teams is fairly large.
Yes.
And it's not
yes.
just, like a top of the ladder lower. It's like how these two teams operate. And yeah, Essendon just don't have much centre bounce presence. And the Bulldogs have lethality from the centre bounce.
The Bulldogs, to put it as like a black and white contrast, Essendon, not good. The Dogs, good.
Yeah. Sometimes football is easy like that.
Yep. When it comes to these two teams, at least it is exactly like that. All right, let's jump over now to the traditional Easter Monday clash between Hawthorn and Geelong at the MCG. Hawthorn hosting this time around. I believe they change it every year, just purely for like like ticket sales and stuff like that. A lot of these marquee games do that kind of thing. But yeah, this is going to be a very interesting matchup. We haven't seen much of the Hawks this year. Again, they just came off of a bye as well. So I don't entirely know what to expect coming into this one.
Yeah, because again, like the Hawks, smashed by GWS, but otherwise, yeah, fairly reasonable. I've totally forgotten their last game. Where's their form guide? Yeah, they beat Sydney and then smashed Essendon. So ish.
Yeah, there's not much of a sample size for what to kind of expect out of Hawthorn.
It's like basically both the teams would just be like, "Oh, can you please like ignore our first game of the season?" Okay, thanks.
Yep, pretty much.
The rest has been okay. Yeah, it's just like a question of with Hawthorn, scoring's been pretty good. Are they gonna be willing to make this game a bit of a shootout? As I said, both these teams can generate some very high frantic pace off the halfback and wings. It's just, as I said, if it's all run and gun, then you're opening up Geelong to get their forward line up. But if you try and like make it a dour contest like Adelaide tried to, then yeah, as I said, you would trust Geelong's inside midfield to get more of it. But obviously where Hawthorn get a bit more of the edge is that back six and the transition that they should probably be able to get to it. Geelong's stopping of defensive transition hasn't been that good. I mean, it's hard to say because it was like dreadfully woeful against the Suns and just okay for the other two games. So yeah, it's what Hawks able to generate of halfback, what Hawks are able to generate of turnover. Again, Geelong aren't the cleanest team in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said for the Cats, the more quote unquote standard game that they can have, I think sort of goes into their favour. It's a slight edge to Geelong, but there's a lot of different ways this game goes, and it's maybe not by far the most interesting match, but it's hard not to get a bit excited about this.
Yeah, it's always a really good clash early in the season between these two. I just don't know where to lean. I don't know, like, I don't know. I don't know.
There's also the tiny factor of like, I still reckon teams that lost in prelims tend to do well in the next season. I don't know if that's always true or not. So like, maybe that gives also a bit of an edge. But like, I feel like natural tipping convention's telling me to go Geelong. I don't know. As I said, it's pretty 50-50.
I mean, we've seen...
No one's going to begrudge you getting this one wrong.
Yeah, exactly right. Like, this is one of the other very, very 50-50 games of this round. We have seen more of Geelong so far, and, like, granted, they've been 50-50 in some areas, but have been really good in others. Like, their midfield is still fantastic, but their forward line has been hit or miss. Their defense has been a little hit or miss. Hawthorn, again, we haven't seen as much of a sample size, but their defense from the games that we have seen has been solid. Their forward line has still been solid. Jack Gunston still got it somehow. Like,
yeah,
I saw an article last week that was like, could the old man hit 100 this season? And like with the way that Hawthorn generate score to him,
yeah,
it's entirely possible. Which is really weird.
I wouldn't say highly possible, but it's like not zero, and that's amazing.
No, yeah, that's exactly like it's the reality of hitting 100 is like probably 5%. just because of the fact that we haven't seen
Yeah, I'd
a
say so.
100 goal
Yeah.
season in a long time. Buddy
Yeah.
Franklin being the last person to
Yeah, well,
do
I
it.
mean, look, Hawthorn's a very efficient team. They won't need as many inside 50s. And yeah, Gunson's except for last week where it went 4-4, is a very good converter. So again, not impossible. There's others this season I'd say are more likely, but geez, it's interesting. So just the fact that his career's gone so high, like he had like it really puts the Hawthorn three-peat era in perspective. Like how seemingly average it looks in compared to his current stats.
Yeah, it's
And
because
those that like he was such a useful player in
to be
that
fair,
team.
the amount of incredible talent that he had around him is in that
Oh
three-peat.
yeah.
Like, does make a difference because he's working with a lot of younger players now, especially in the
Yeah.
forward line,
No, exactly.
and is still like
he needs to take that responsibility and is doing it really well.
exactly he's being a leader, which a lot of other teams could learn from.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah, in terms of tipping, honestly, maybe wait for the team sheets for this one because it's genuinely a tough 50-50.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and there's a few things like Dangerfield could be back.
Yes.
They might play Warple.
Yes.
Yeah.
This would be a good Warpedo game actually against his old club, so that could be really interesting.
Yeah, old club. Yeah.
And then in terms of the buys, I believe this is our last buy round. In terms of the carryovers from opening round, if not, there might be one more next week. I can't remember. But St Kilda and the Giants are off this week. So we don't have to see the atrocious games from them at the very least.
Yeah. Well, next week's gather round, so
oh yeah, next week is gather round. Yeah, so
isn't it?
everyone is back. I forgot that was next week. Excellent, love that. Yeah. So in terms of everything else, that pretty much brings us to the end of the episode. Unless there's anything else you want to quickly cover.
No, I think that's it. Again, not the most enjoyable week for me to view a football, but we're starting to get the points where we're starting to actually like get the sense of a few teams.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the question marks will need a few more weeks for. Some of the schedules we need to get a bit harder to really see where some teams are at, but it is very exciting to see the shape of the season. It's not as straightforward as we thought it was might going to be, but there's still plenty of old guard contenders and there's some nice up and coming ones. So yeah,
absolutely. It'll be very interesting to have a look further ahead into the season as we approach like the middle of the season, just to kind of see like if some of these like younger teams, like your West Coast, your Norths, I guess your Carltons and Melbournes in this sense, like whether they do have a shot to continue to punch up, especially like if their schedules are a lot tougher in the back half, or if they kind of just sit where we expect them to kind of end up sitting. But I mean, for at least 3 of those teams, solid start to the season.
Yeah, obviously, Carlton, we're sort of waiting to actually get continual punches.
that is the one.
But as I said, like even like for such a grim outlook, like there's still that positive of that. They're still getting in winning positions, which is and we've even if you do argue about it, there's some optimism.
We've seen positive signs from like players that they've brought in recently, or like over the past few years, like Jagger Smith, like Harry Dean. So that's always good to see in terms of development for their future as well. That does bring us to the end of the episode. Thank you all so much for liking, commenting, subscribing, and just coming to hang out with us this week. Again, this week ahead is Easter. I am going to be flat out with work, but also because there's an Easter Monday clash and we're both busy Easter Monday, there's a fair chance the episode won't be out till Wednesday. So just keep an eye out for that. I will obviously make social posts and stuff like that just to remind you all. Otherwise, we hope you all have a wonderful Easter if you celebrate. If you're going through Ramadan at the moment, I hope you're looking after yourself in this period of, I don't know how to describe it, religious reflection. I don't really know where I was going with that.
Yeah, I'd say like reflection. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like that's sort of like the essence of Ramadan.
We'll talk about it obviously in next week's episode, but if you're going to gather round, I hope you have a wonderful time. I think friend of the show Snap is going again this year. I can't remember So I'm sure we'll get some photos and stuff from him of some of the games, which we could probably
Yeah.
use. Hopefully, that'd be nice. Otherwise, that does it for us this week. So thank you all so much once again, and we will see you all next week for episode 100. We don't have anything special planned, but if we do, we will surprise you with it. But until then, take care.